bring this meeting, the Manchester Board of Selectmen, to order on February 19th. And notes will be taken by Gail. We have anybody who's recording other than our, can you take her over here, please let me know when you're recording? Okay, thank you. And if you can just silence your phones and take care of that, that would be greatly appreciated. Before we get started tonight, there's two things. If you're here for the Concom meeting, it's in the room down the hall. More than welcome to stay with us, but Concom is meeting down there if you're interested in that. And secondly, I want to recognize and give our best thoughts and wishes to Paul Clark, who had a tough fall this week and is in the hospital. And we're keeping our fingers crossed, and I think he's doing much better, but please send all your prayers and good thoughts. He's been such and will continue to be a wonderful asset to our community and part of the cricket and taking pictures and just very active. So we just want to recognize him and wish him the best. Okay, so first on the agenda tonight is around the Central Pond and the dam and culvert issue. We addressed this in our last meeting, went through a very, very thorough review with the folks, the engineers. And tonight we're going to run through that one more time and see if we have any further questions and any other positioning that we have. And our hope is that we'll come to a conclusion tonight to move ahead. So with that, Greg, do you want to, or Chuck, do you want to tee us up?
So I think in terms of the overview, it's been a project that's been under study for a number of years. Thanks to the hard work of Mary Riley, we've received over $400,000 worth of grant funding to study the watershed and to develop design plans, not only for the culvert itself, but for the watershed, the upstream culverts, and the pond itself. We do have an additional $500,000 grant for the construction of the culvert and the bridge dam itself, as well as town funds that have been appropriated. So we're working towards the design of that repairs to the bridge and culvert. And hopefully that work will get underway. Probably it's a year away from construction, if not a little longer, because of the pretty heavy permitting process that it involves. But tonight, again, as you indicated, the real question before us tonight is the upstream issue of the pond itself. Last meeting, you heard a presentation on three basic options. One is to reestablish the stream as a free-flowing stream. Sort of middle-of-the-road option is to put ripples and rock impediments to create a couple of small ponded areas. And the third option is to create more of a full official pond that would be there at low tide as well as high tide. Obviously, at high tide, all three options, there's basically a pond. So there are a lot of pros and cons on each of those three options. To quickly summarize, there was a chart that the engineers went over at the last meeting. Certainly the free-flowing stream is the most attractive in terms of flood mitigation for upstream flooding. It has the disadvantage of not having a pond there during low tide, and for some abutters that is certainly a concern. The other options that include ponding would be very difficult from a permitting perspective because you have to put in place a new impediment in the stream. The current tide gate has to be removed. The state won't approve the improvements to the culvert with that downstream floodgate, so you'd have to put something above stream, so that requires a new permitting process. So there's the permitting challenges, there's the long-term maintenance, and also the construction cost of any new structures to recreate a ponding effect. So I don't know if you want to add to that, Chuck, but that's...
No, I think
it's
I have nothing really to add. That's pretty much sums it up. Like Greg said, we're still a year away from construction. However, the permitting of the two options are tied together. So that's essentially why we kind of need a decision to move forward with the permitting so that we can get to the culvert in the short term and longer term, the other construction.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment that the first, the natural option is going to be the easiest, cheapest way to do it. Most natural. The other two options, as Greg explained, will require permitting. It's not even clear that putting things in there would be permitted.
Right. Thank you. Is there anyone else here in the audience that is here to speak about the Sawmill River Dam piece at all? Any comments on that?
Jessica Lamoth. I'm actually speaking for the stream team, and we are all for the natural option. I note you have in your correspondence a letter from Francie Caudill that really summed up better than anything I can sort of why we are for it in addition to the already stated. So I saw that was kind of further down in the agenda, and I just wanted to make sure that her letter was considered as part of this, but we are very much for the natural option.
Any comments from the board?
No, I think Mary's done a tremendous amount of work in public outreach and contacts and presentations and information, and so I think it makes sense to make our decision and get going.
No, I think I was there with Mary the first day that we looked at the actual structure. So I think it's the right thing to do. I just the only thing that lingers for me is just that I just keep looking at those maps and I keep looking at how many people are affected. And despite all the outreach, I know there's been several times of outreach, but I feel like this should be coupled with some sort of further education program. I don't know how we organize that or deliver that, but I just feel like the community, something tells me that there's a lot of people who don't know, even after all the attempts. And that's not a comment on the attempts. I think it's symptomatic of a lot of things that we do in town to educate and build awareness. But I think there's just a lot of property owners that aren't aware. But that doesn't change the structural need or the flow of the water. It's just oh no! I wasn't suggesting that there was any failure in the effort, but
Well, I think one of the things, and this is a theme that will come up as we talk later about grants and how we use them and how we work with our town departments who work really hard at these things in conjunction with the committees and boards that, sort of had adjunct responsibility for it. I think that there needs to be a very clear stream of communication from pre-grant through grant process, through all the different parameters that happen. And even when it is accepted, so for example, this is a year out, there's still permitting to happen. There's still opportunities to engage and talk to residents about that. I think that based on the three options that we have in front of us, the sort of feasibility for going back to the natural stream seems to make the most sense as a starting point because it doesn't cost, it's not the high cost measure. It's also not a lot to maintain, and those other issues, the other two have more. I think from a position that we might want to consider is saying, let's start there and vote in to go back to the natural resource piece, work through all of the permitting, see where we need to go, and reevaluate, in 6 months to a year, once that's in there, to say, how's this working? I think that's another piece that we need to follow up with, is making sure that we evaluate and see how things are going. Not to say that we would change anything, but if something comes up and we had another question or there's an opportunity for people to engage, that's an important point. So,
well, I think another aspect is that, looking long term and trying to look at flooding farther upstream and wanting to potentially modify other culverts, it wouldn't do much good to be modifying those without having the last one in place properly. I think most people would be happy to know that they might not flood.
all right. Any other comments on that before we go to a vote? Is there a motion that we can consider tonight?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve or choose the stream option based on the evaluation that was provided to us.
Second.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so you have our decision. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate your hard work on this, Gary. Thank you. Thanks, Chuck. Okay, item number 2. You're not getting to go anywhere, right? Okay. DPW updates, compost facility and complete streets. All right, where would you like to start?
We have a consultant from VHB here to do a quick presentation on just kind of the update for complete streets aspect, and then I'm happy to talk about any composting or other DPW initiatives. But so this is Trish Domigan. She's from VHB, consultant that we hired to review the complete streets as it was conceptualized, and that was happened in the previous year or so, where it was accepted and brought forward for tier 3 projects that Trish will talk about. There's a certain order that was included and kind of prescribed within the complete streets program. And so there's essentially 3 intersections and a 4th corridor, I'll call it, that were part of the tier 3 projects, which are projects that are meant to be designed and permitted if applicable and constructed in fiscal year 19. So that would be by June 30th of this year. So we're getting to the point where we need to make sure that we're keeping everybody abreast of the situation. We have reached out. I know there's people in the audience that are interested in some of these intersections specifically, and we'll go from there. So with that, I guess I'll hand it over to Trish to kind of do a little bit of the history and where we are design as of now.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I wasn't sure if Chuck was going to give me the microphone.
You're all set.
As Chuck mentioned, my name is Trish Domigan. I work at the design consulting firm of VHB. Last summer, Chuck asked me to take a look at the Complete Streets funding program that the town had applied to the state for, just to give them a little bit of guidance. I do this a lot for a lot of communities in Massachusetts. Just a brief background. In 2017, so a couple of years ago, the town went through the Complete Streets process where you identified a policy, you applied for technical assistance through Mass DOT, and put together a prioritization plan in partnership with Tool Design Group and NAPC. The team, the Complete Streets team, identified 18 projects that you could apply for funding for. In the fall of 2017, the town applied for funding for a number of them and received approval for 4 locations. This is just a snapshot of what the prioritization plan is. There was 18 total. If you want a copy of this, I'd be happy. It's on your website if you want to just take a peek at it. It goes into a lot of detail on what exactly the projects are and how they rate in terms of the rating system that the state uses to develop a complete streets project.
So just jump in.
Sure.
So this full report is on the website. It includes all the public outreach that was part of this project. There were 5 public forums as part of this effort. Probably had over 200 citizens participate, which is a good amount of participation. And it's a little bit of background.
Mass DOT approved for 4 projects. Beach Street at Union Street, improvements at that intersection was about $27,000. Central Union Schools, $45,000. Washington Summer and Sea Street was about $48,000. And then a shared use path, that's what SUP means, a shared use path along Beach Street was $144,000 that you received approval for. The next couple of slides are just improvements, what is envisioned at each of the locations. So I will step through it. So at Beach Street, at Union Street, the intent was to improve the pedestrian crossing on both Union Street and Beach Street. The original design that was part of the Complete Streets prioritization plan had a refuge island in here, and we started to take a look at that. And it's really a narrow roadway under existing conditions with parking on either side of the street. And we thought a better approach would be just to define where the parking is and put in handicap ramps with crosswalks that cross Beach Street and also Union Street. What this bulb out is here, this right here is new sidewalk area. So the existing sidewalk would be kept in place up to this little bulb out. The sidewalk would be extended out, and then the wheelchair ramp leading to a crosswalk would follow to this one, which in turn would follow to this one. So it's better defining the intersection. Right now, the intersection is fairly wide. People don't really know where to go. I think a lot of people come down Union Street and get on Beach Street rather quickly. They stop sometimes at the stop line. So this was the plan. I also asked the folks that are working with me at BHB just to put in some of the new signage that would be included as part of the intersection improvements.
How many parking spots were lost with this?
This would be the 3 parking spots. I'm going to get into a little bit within the intersection itself. So it's 3 right here.
Is it legal to park like that in an intersection anyway?
No.
That's what, okay, thank you.
And I can get into that at the end of the presentation if you want me to. Can you, next slide, please? The intersection of Central Street at Union Street and School Street, again, we're making this a more defined intersection. We were creating bulb outs right in front of Town Hall, right here, and better defining where the crosswalks are and where pedestrians are supposed to be traveling along the street. It's interesting, the existing geometry, and you all know this, but from a designer's perspective who doesn't live in Manchester, the existing geometry has people that are traveling on Union Street and they drive over the sidewalk here to get on School Street. And one of the intent was to better define, and I'm not sure if you can see this, but this is the edge of the sidewalk right now. Just better define it so people will be turned a little bit away from School Street so that when they make the turn, they won't be traveling onto the sidewalk itself. So what that's called is roadway geometry. So we're changing the roadway geometry just slightly here to better define this curve and where people are supposed to be along this curve. The bulb outs here, the whole intent is to bring the pedestrians that want to cross the street out away from the parked cars. And the reason for that is so that it's a little bit more visible for people who are crossing over the street to be out next to the travel lane instead of behind a parked car, to be able to cross on both Central Street, Union Street, and School Street. You're going to ask the question, so I'll answer it. The lost parking will be in the middle of the intersection where, by state and federal standards, this is not allowed parking, but we will be including an additional parking space here where the existing crosswalk is. We can remove that and then install an additional parking space. So I think there's 3 parking spaces total that will be removed here. At Washington, Summer, and C Street, there are 2 options here. This was the option that was in the prioritization plan, was a illuminated sign. It's called an RRFB, Rapid Rectangular Flashing Beacon, was going to be installed at the crosswalk on Summer Street. It's similar to the one that you have on
Just further up.
north, right? So it'll be similar to that, down gradient from the intersection itself. On C Street, we extended out the sidewalk at the intersection to better define this. It's a pretty wide open intersection for a local street, so we wanted to better define that. Install new wheelchair ramps on either side, and then better define the intersection of Washington Street with Summer Street. And what that does is it allows people who are traveling on C Street to not shoot across the intersection. So they actually have to come on Summer Street, make the turn, see if anyone's coming on Summer Street, and then make the movement onto Washington Street. The second option for this intersection would be to eliminate the crossing down here with the RRFB. One of the thoughts was to put the crosswalk here, and this is the town's discretion, whatever you want to do. This is if you're driving on Summer Street, this is the crest of the hill, and it's, from a visibility perspective, it's a better place to cross pedestrians, because motorists that are on Summer Street will be better. It's just visibly better to have it here at the crest of the curve than to have it as a mid-block crossing. It's at the intersection. It's people are aware when they're traveling through the intersection that there's things that might be happening at the intersection, so they'll be aware of a pedestrian crossing. Whereas if it's down here, they're just on a corridor, so they're not expecting people to be walking out in the middle of the street. Again, we are suggesting that Washington Street, the geometry here is, it reduces the crosswalk length, and also it'll be better defining this intersection so that, again, folks on C Street can come out into traffic and then turn onto Washington Street.
Just a question on this one. So there's that existing crosswalk just off your diagram towards Becky. Yeah. Would you keep both of those then?
If they're both used, you could consider it, but if this works to have you could move the crosswalk so it's all at an intersection. It's better to have a crossing at an intersection than a mid-block crossing.
Just to clarify something on this one, C Street remains two-way in this one, right?
Yes. What Chuck also asked us is to take a look at a shared use path on Beach Street. One of the prioritization projects was to install a 10-foot wide sidewalk essentially on the coast side of Beach Street from the MBTA tracks to the beach, Singing Beach. We took a look at different alternatives to do that. When I went out to take a look at where the sidewalk is right now, you have about a 6-foot wide sidewalk in the denser where the parking is area, and then it narrows down to about a 4 or 5 foot wide sidewalk. And there's some impacts to like street lights or the curbing that would be out there. You would have to encroach on the park. There would be some trees removed. So we took a look at different options and then put a cost estimate based on what contractors' prices would be for any of the improvements. The drainage would also, thank you, the drainage would also have to be reconstructed as part of the process. And the costs were pretty excessive compared to what you already received approval for. It was about a $500,000 difference. So based on what you've already received approval for funding, $144,000, we looked at different options to see if we could actually make a design that would cost that amount. So what we were suggesting is from M Street to the beach parking lot, you could install a sidewalk or repair the sidewalk that's out there for about $144,000. And the next few slides are just showing, yes, sorry. Instead of me trying to say the name, I thought M Street would be a little bit easier for you to understand what I'm talking about. So this is from Masco Street going towards the beach. So the beach is, the Singing Beach parking lot is over here. And what we were suggesting was just if you look at this cross section, this is the existing roadway, a 10-foot wide, just an asphalt surface, just to repair what's out there right now and make it a little bit wider. There's about the right of way, so the town layout line is about 45 feet wide. What you would need to do is trim back some of the vegetation in here to reconstruct the sidewalk. There's ADA issues, so the profile of the sidewalk, especially in this area right at the intersection itself, is a lot steeper than what the federal requirements are. The profile would have to be about 4.5%, and I would say, this is just a guess because we don't have survey, I would say it's about 8%. So it's a pretty steep sidewalk in this area. It flattens out the closer you get to the beach. There is some encroachment. Some folks have put fences or gates within the layout, so things like that would have to get moved, and that's a thought that the town has to consider if you want to develop this a little bit further. Next slide, please. So the sidewalk would come down here, and I apologize for the graphics. They didn't look so washed out on my laptop. And what this would do is we would just be removing and placing everything that is privately owned back to the layout line, and having the sidewalk end at an area where you could install bike racks. Right now, there's no parking in this little corner. So you could install a few bike racks for the folks that are coming down from the center of town to the beach and, put their bikes in the parking area and then walk to the beach. So that's the amount of construction that you could do with the grant amount that you have right now. Next slide.
Well, out of curiosity, I have a question. What was lost in the The 500,000? You said that's a scaled down version, so what was,
So the 500,000 would go from the train tracks
okay,
right down here,
Yep.
all the way up to the beach itself.
okay.
Yeah. It was just one side. Oh, we looked at different alternatives. So if you look at Beach Street from a engineer's perspective, it's actually shifted on one side of the layout. So we looked at installing the 10-foot wide shared use path on the opposite side from where the sidewalk is right now to see if there's enough room because there's a grassed area right next to the roadway. Unfortunately, once you get closer to the intersection, it gets pretty tight and there would be some right-of-way impacts there. So there would be encroachment on private property. You would have to take some land. I think the intent of the presentation tonight is to discuss the intersections, but also the grant program, as Chuck had mentioned, the funding that you've received from the state has to be expended by June 30th of this year. So I think the next step would be to develop the design a little bit further for the 3 intersections, put it to bid, and see what the prices are. And then you can make a decision on whether or not you want to move forward with the project.
Was there, on the 3, on the first 2 in particular?
Yeah.
Looks like there's a loss of parking spaces.
That's correct.
Is it part of your charter to do economic effects to the town by the loss of parking? So you're looking at that in the middle of a commercial zone. So
I'm looking at it from a purely engineering perspective, so I didn't look to see what the cost ramifications were for parking spots that were removed from an intersection. But from an engineering perspective, we, as licensed engineers in Massachusetts or in the United States, need to follow state and federal regulations on what is allowable and what's not allowable in terms of design standards and parameters. And one of the things, actually the last slide after the questions, I put this on here because I knew this was going to be a question. One of the federal mandates is to follow what's called the MUTCD and the UVC. So the MUTCD is the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And what that does is it sets a standard on a national level so that everyone uses the same stop signs and stop lines, and everything's pretty similar in terms of what the guidance requirements are. And if you didn't have that, then every state would have something a little bit different, and the laws of the road would be different on a state-by-state basis. So it's a federal document that we follow as civil engineers doing transportation work. What these 3 graphics here show is that parking is not allowed from a crosswalk to a parking stall for 20 feet at intersections, and this is non-signalized intersections. So if you actually take a look at the state and federal standards that we have to follow, and when we develop designs, we have to not have parking within 20 feet outside of an intersection within 20 feet of a crosswalk, and that's how the 3 locations were, well, actually the 2 locations were designed. So we were following federal standards to do so. In terms of parking within an intersection, that's just not, that's not allowed. So yes, you are removing parking as part of the 2 intersection designs, but they don't follow state and federal standards.
and what's the effect? How do you retroactively deal with noncompliance?
You have to comply with it if you're using state or federal money. From a town's perspective, if you were doing, you should, from a safety perspective and a practical perspective, you should be following design guidelines.
Yeah.
So, you know, when a project's getting constructed, you can fix it, but from, you know, going back and evaluating all intersections, I don't know if that's practical, to be perfectly honest.
Practical, so I'm just trying to understand.
You would have to go back and reconstruct all your intersections that
Yeah.
don't comply with it right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
why it's not been a process.
To expound on that a little bit, I think you know, the other thing, we're not going and looking for intersections to these are the intersections that were prioritized. And so as part of our due diligence and our design process, we need to bring them up to standards. So we're not retroactively going back and looking for other intersections to do. We have plenty that we could, but these were the three that are being, that are on the table right now.
Yeah, I don't think, you can't dispute, any sort of federal or state regulation. Nonetheless, these are regulations, and we're, in this room, we have to deal with reality of the town.
Absolutely.
And that's part of your job as well. And so, to I guess, just as feedback it all makes sense. And if I'm an engineer, I'm not, but it does make sense if I were to be one. But the reality is that there is a derivative impact on the town as it relates to parking, which already is a premium, and it ties into the local retail and local businesses, which I would characterize as already anemic. So I think there's, from a town perspective, it just seems like a dramatic change. And I'm not saying it's a bad dramatic change, but to go this extensive and not to consider the economic impact in the wake of these changes seems
Sure.
like we're not.
Well, I think, to be honest, I think that's why when the state comes to you with a grant program like Complete Streets, they're asking you to go back and look at these intersections and bring them up to a code that allow, the whole idea of Complete Streets is allowing equal access to vehicles, whether that be driving or parking, plus bikes when applicable, or pedestrians. And so it really is what they're trying to do. And the reason they're giving you this money is so that you make those sacrifices on one end to accommodate another. And there is a direct impact going in either direction.
Oh, yeah, there's many factors. There's safety, there's federal regulation. There's
exactly.
I just think it's incumbent on us and you in particular with us to think through the other impacts, which is, especially in the wake of the roundabout experience, we make dramatic changes with good intent, and it doesn't fit with what the town wants. And so we got to balance what the town wants with what federal regulation says, with state funding. And so I'm not saying there's an easy answer. I'm just saying, have we really thought through as a town all of the implications of this? It sounds like we're checking the box on federal and state regulation. It sounds like we're checking the box on funding. Are we checking the box on the town, appreciating and understanding what this change means, not just to daily behaviors, but to the economy of downtown? Because removing, it's at least 5 parking spaces? Yeah. And so out of those, and out of the parking in out of the combined broader parking in that region, that's probably at least 10 to 15% of all parking. So somewhere around 10%, 5%, 5 to 10%. So the translation into the average daily traffic in the town, reducing that and having that felt by the local establishments. I'm just pointing out things that we need to.
I'm not
think through. So-
disputing it. I guess from, it's a legitimate point. I guess I'm
not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I think it's like a Rubik's Cube.
and
We gotta
again,
look at
I'm
all the
not-
different angles before we start making
Sure.
significant change.
Yeah, I just think that it's the town went forward. I wasn't here when they did the Complete Streets program in general, but I kind of go back to that was the whole idea.
Yeah,
was
I don't
to
think there's
eliminate-
a challenge to Complete Streets. I think we're dealing with the rubber hitting the road, no pun intended, of what some of these changes actually mean, and I think what's incumbent on us to continue with standing behind Complete Streets, but then to look at some of the particular recommendations coming out of that work and what that really means for the town, not just in terms of state and federal regulation. I guess my point.
So, I have a little bit of history on this. So for those of you who remember the Downtown Improvement Project version 1, the initial design of that one involved removing a lot of parking spaces, so much so that there was a bit of an uprising, and the project was reconfigured to put some of those back. And after that project was done, the downtown area was a lot more navigable to pedestrians, which I think a lot of people value. There are some people who don't really like the bump outs, but I think overall the pedestrian access is much improved. Subsequent to Downtown Improvement Project 1, the Downtown Improvement Project Committee was tasked with looking at a couple of intersections. And this was probably 8 years ago. I remember when I first came on this board, spending a bunch of time with the DIP when they were considering the new projects. And new projects, among the things that was prioritized for them by the town 8 years ago or 7 years ago or in that time frame, were specifically Central Street and School Street intersection, which everybody has trouble with the stop sign there, and if you're a pedestrian crossing, it's one of the few places in town which, well, it really sucks crossing the street there because it's a really wide crosswalk, and everybody parks right up next to it, so you're blind coming out of the crosswalk to get across the street. Not everybody stops. And it's a place where people cross the street a lot. So it's been an issue, and everybody has felt like it's been an issue and a stressor for pedestrians for a very long time. So much so that 8 years ago or so, the DIP committee was tasked with it as a priority. The other intersection that was a priority for them, one of them was the Union Street intersection. Similar reasons. The crosswalks are there, but they are challenging for people to use. They're very long, and they're a little bit blind. And everybody felt it as a pedestrian going across those crosswalks. In particular, you know, you send your kids across the crosswalk and you really wonder, is people going to stop? And you train your kids not to cross there because it's a terrible place to cross. And that's not really good for the downtown area. So for a very long time, way before the Complete Streets project, the town actually has prioritized a look at these two intersections in particular, and has been wanting a solution to it. Most of the solutions at that time, all of them, all of these solutions are relatively not particularly new in many respects. They all involve some loss of parking, and that was one of the things that I remember telling the DIP project 6 years ago. It's like, for the love of God, don't take away parking spots, there'll be an uprising. Well, I still feel to some extent that may be true. But I've also seen 6 years pass and more since they started in on this project that was prioritized for them by the town. And we have not made any progress for it. We know what the solutions are for those intersections. It's pretty straightforward at this point. But the will to do something about it seems to be pushed back on by the need to not touch parking spaces. And I'm beginning to wonder if that priority needs to be overridden at this point. And we should just fix the intersections so pedestrians can have reasonable transit, and we fix the stop signs so our cars can go through. And it's on our priority list to take a global look at the town at parking. But I don't think a global look at the town from respect of parking is going to alter the construction of those intersections in the future. It may alter the parking around it to add more parking spaces someplace else to offset that. But the construction of those intersections will look basically the same regardless of the outcome of that global parking research that we do, or planning. So there's a big chunk of me, there's a big part of me that's just inclined to bite the bullet, take care of these intersections now. We'll take a hit for the missing parking spaces, but it'll improve the traffic flow and it will make it safer for pedestrians. I did have one technical question about the Central and School Street intersection. Emergency vehicles and trucks oftentimes make that turn on a school street, and the engineering says, yes, that's going to still fly, or are they still?
No, it's still going to fly. So if you look at it, we're better defining the alignment of Union Street to Central Street so people can't just shoot across the sidewalk, but it still has a wide throat there so that emergency vehicles can still make the movement either from Central Street onto School or Union onto School and then School onto either road. So it meets all the standards for your emergency vehicles.
All right, any other comments from the board before I open up for public?
I just want to say that I think that the safety is what's really paramount. There have been accidents, both vehicular and pedestrian. And I think that we need to address these before. Cars are bigger, they're bigger now and they're going faster now. And an accident has a lot more potential.
Thanks. Can we pass the mic back? Oh, no, right there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Linda Crosby, and I own the building on the corner of Central and School Street, have for many years. And this is my manager, Mike Butler, who can well speak of the issues that have to do with that corner. I just have a couple of real concerns. One, we had an accident at that building last summer, and our insurance company asked me to come and talk to the DPW. It was my understanding this plan was well underway, and there was going to be a public hearing in the fall. That hasn't happened. The abutters I've talked to in the area aren't aware of this for the most part. Maybe some of them are. And also, it was my understanding that the DIP was going to have a meeting before it was presented to you. And I don't think that's happened yet. I think that's about to happen. So now we're up against the time frame of June, and I just feel like this needs more attention. I completely agree that the pedestrian issue has to be addressed. I guess I am wondering, number one, is there any way to address it without the bump outs? The positioning of the crosswalks too deep into School Street for one, and it's dangerous. Can they be changed somehow without losing all that parking? If we didn't use state or federal funding, am I understanding that we could do some adjustment without having to do the exact codes? And I'm not saying we shouldn't manage the codes, but we've already lost at least six parking spaces on that corner. The ones in front of Club Excel, which needed to go. We lost one in front of my building. We have one remaining, which will go, I think, with this plan. We lost the one by the little street coming out by the library. So let's say there's six before we even get to this loss. And I am concerned about the other corner and the number there as well, because the industry there, the restaurant going in, the new restaurant and the empty storefronts and so forth. How will this be impacted, as Arthur has said? And the other question I have just is this the way a town of our historic proportions would handle that intersection? Is it going to look appropriate? Is there any other way? Do we think about the fact we're verging upon our 375th anniversary, and this particular part of town at School and Central, I think, is one of the most historic parts of our town that we need to preserve and think about before we do this. Can I just ask Mike to add a comment about
My name is Mike Butler. First of all, thank you for inviting us here. I've been living in the building for about 4 years. I had taken over the maintenance for Linda, and I have seen an extraordinary amount of issues. One, of course, is the corner. That whole corner, which is a major drain, water drain, has been crushed. And simply by major trucks making that turn, can't make that turn, drive over the concrete corner. Landscape trucks with trailers right over, very loud. I think it goes farther. It is a safety issue, by all means. I've crossed that crosswalk and almost got hit. People do speed down that street. Two, I don't really think it's a street that's conducive to trucks in general. Not only in that corner. Actually, I saw one day a massive tractor trailer truck couldn't make the turn. He had to 3-point back up, held up traffic. I did see a car go by and wipe out a mirror on a car. You get past the fire station, you can't even have two cars pass each other, never mind big dump trucks or any trucks. I've seen where the old colonial home comes out to the point on that turn. I've seen some pretty close calls there with the bigger trucks coming through and making a wider turn. I think that whole area where the bridge is for that Stony Brook has been destroyed due to weight. You also get up to where the Catholic church is, opposite side of the street, the old tree. Trucks have to come out around that. And also the corner up by where the Boy Scout building is. That's a very dangerous corner. So to me, it's a bigger issue of not just the intersection. Even if you put this bump out, those trucks are going to drive right over the corner of that bump out. I can guarantee that. Because I've seen it and watched it. So to me, it's a bigger problem, not just the intersection, but the whole street. Okay, and it is dangerous. It is a dangerous street for very large trucks and vehicles. So I would be wondering if there was any way that you could designate a truck route. Now, the Pine Street, which is the safest truck route, I did notice now that your bigger tractor trailer trucks, Associated Grocers, Hoods, they don't even go up School Street. Okay, they keep going straight and they go down Pine Street. It's the safest route. Are you going to get complaints? Yeah, you're going to get complaints on School Street too. But it's a matter of safety too. Again, you do get to that intersection. It is dangerous. It's one dangerous intersection. That's what I've observed. To me, it's more of a safety issue in general. In that, maybe you can have trucks come down to the corner of the graveyard as you're coming in off the highway. Post signs, no truck route from that point on. They can turn right down, back onto Pine Street, or vice versa. But I do fear that at some point, somebody's really going to get hurt. I really do. So it's great that you're looking at this. Safety is the key there. I've watched it. I myself crossing the long part there, people, sometimes they'll stop, sometimes they won't. You have to really hesitate. And of course, a crosswalk that's near our front door, people coming around the corner from Union Street can't even see you until they're on top of you. And then boom, a lot of people do speed down that road. I catch myself yelling out, slow down. They don't hear me, but I do. So that's how I feel
Thank you.
About this.
Good, okay.
It's a reality.
Any other comments in the, Jessica?
Jessica Lamoff, 21 Walker Road, very quickly. As most of you know, I walk all the time, everywhere downtown. And I certainly understand the concerns for the parking, but I remember everyone's freaking out about the bump outs in front of the post office. And I, for one, feel so much safer crossing there, which I do all the time with the bump outs. This particular intersection's a nightmare when I'm walking, as is the Union Central, that whole one. So I certainly feel for the parking. I think it is a bigger issue that needs to be resolved kind of all over town, but there's certainly pedestrian safety all for this. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, so this was a very helpful update. Thank you very much. Very, very helpful. So we have some decisions to make. I think the thing I hear loud and clear, which I'm very sensitive to, in particular, based on all of our work that we do our best to reach out, but I want to be double sure that we are doing that. I would suggest that, and I agree with Eli's viewpoint as well. We've been bouncing these for a long time. We've been talking about it and moving the ball very slowly. And part of our responsibility is to be decisive and make good decisions for the town based on the feedback that we've got. And we have actively pursued grants and money. I'm also sensitive to the counter of that, which is the roundabout discussion and how we went through all that. So what I want to do is try to chart a path that gives us the best information, which we have some very good information here, with the best community engagement and making sure that we, not to say that we haven't engaged the community, but now that we're getting to a point where we're actually making some decisions about this, for people to really get engaged and see what these things look like. I'm tending to, I'm going to take Greg's point on this, is on March 4th, and this isn't about pushing it out 6 months. It's about, being smart and looking at this. On March 4th, having a public hearing about these sites, where we can have people come in, talk about it, hear about it, if there's any questions, concerns they have, garner some more feedback, engage with the retail owners on the street, making sure that those people are engaged, they understand what's going on, And I think to the point, and Eli's right on this too, you know, we do need to engage a parking study. It's actually something that we've cited going forward into next year. Is that going to change this particular area? Probably not, but it could find ways for us to offset some of the loss, and that's part of the challenge that we have overall.
I just want to add a couple of things. So I have certainly engaged the DIPS and the Bike and Ped Committee on these intersections and the program in general and countless other things. So I think that they have been informed, and I rely on them to, post their agendas, and we have been on their agenda. I am committed, as Lynn said, to having another meeting with them. They didn't have a February meeting, so I didn't have a chance. So that's fine. I think what I'm looking for, and I think this was a good educational point, and I'm happy to look at truck routes. I think I agree. It's not going to change the intersections in general. To improve this intersection, I think, as we've shown, for pedestrian access, you're going to lose basically the parking that's not technically legal, and that will have an effect. I can't quantify it at this time. We can talk to Trish and we can look into that more. But again, it won't be solved by this project. It'll have to be solved by a separate project. I guess what I'm looking for is a consensus that we should go forward, and as Trish alluded to on some of the slides here, we have a cost issue. So the money that was covered in the grant is not available to do all of this work. So if I need to have that process play itself out so I can have an intelligent conversation, because I've talked to the people at the state for Complete Streets, and they're not just going to give me additional funds to do this work. They have a budget as well. And so it might be the type of thing where I can only do one of these intersections for the money we have, and they say, do it or you can't do it because you need to come up with the money, which we don't have in any other account at this time. So I would like to have that process play out. They told me don't come back to us and ask for more money or to have another conversation until you have pricing. I won't have pricing until we bid it. So my recommendation would be to bid it as currently designed. I will have opportunity to speak with the selectmen or the community in general, the DIPS, the Bike and Ped, to engage more. But I don't want that to be at the expense of getting the pricing, so I can have that separate conversation with the state. And then at that time, when we have that pricing, we can decide with the board whether or not we approve that contract and we enter into that contract with the contractor. But at least at that point, I'll have the pricing, so we won't lose that time. So I think that's the path forward, at least for the short term. And then there'll be another meeting where we decide whether or not to award the contract.
Right. So you're talking sort of simultaneous streams. Have the
Do a path.
conversation with the DIP and the bike and pedestrian. You do your work, figure those things out, come back to us with sort of next steps. But in conjunction with that, go get some bidding done so that we actually can see the total cost of these.
Yep.
I'd also like to see some combination of options because, we've just come off the Ocean Street discussions. We're going on the heels of the roundabout. I feel like we're running into another situation here where there's available funding. It's hard to argue with that. But in the grand scheme of it, even the funding that's available is not an enormous amount when you look at relative to the change and the impact to the town. So safety is number one. I completely agree with that. But as designed in this particular case, you're talking about a dramatic change to the look and feel of the downtown. And in the name of safety, it's hard to argue. But for if the available money is the driving logic and we're putting ourselves under the gun of time, I don't think that's a good way to make a decision.
We're not making the decision, we're just getting the pricing.
Yeah, but the funding goes away in June. I understand that there's concern about meeting that deadline.
So I think in order for us to do just one project out of the list of 4, we need to present to the state all pricing on all 4. And then that'll allow us then to negotiate with them what I would say the number of the 4 which rises to the top. Maybe we can do 2. I don't see doing all 4 given the funding and the cost of what these projects will come in at.
Is the June 30th an absolute drop dead date? I mean, is this something that we can talk? I mean, I appreciate where we are, but we're, here
I suspect we need to be underway. They might allow, if we didn't finish, but we're underway. I don't know if you have other comments.
Could request an extension, but in doing that, you would have to have justification.
Right.
And I don't think, because you've already submitted the prioritization plan and got the projects approved, I don't know if the state would be willing to consider, taking a look at various alternatives to continue to meet the objective. I think that the intent of developing the prioritization plan was looking at the alternatives.
Right, but I think we're looking at, the point I would make is that we're looking at now the implementation of this.
Right.
We're gathering bids, we're looking at that, we're going through a public process to ensure that our, constituents understand what we're doing, how we're doing it. And I'm not saying that we extend it another year, but even if we had 6 months, just to close this out, because I think our experience has been, we keep pushing very hard against hard dates, and we move things quickly that sometimes if we just had a little bit more time on,
Right.
we could do it. So,
If you have the justification and,
Yeah.
if it's reasonable, then the state will be reasonable also.
I would think so. And I think, again, it's a question to ask as we go through the balance of this, because I know that we've approved it, I know we've gone through a lot of stuff, but when you take to the point of implementation, it's different. This goes off people's radars for a while, we've got to get it back engaged. We want to make sure we make, and after living through, and I wasn't even on any boards through the initial DIP project, and that was huge. Now, granted, at the end of the day, it all worked out great, but there was a lot of contention. So I think if we can be smart about this by doing a parallel process of looking at having a public hearing about the concepts of what we're doing on March 4th, follow through with a bid so that you can get the numbers that you need so we can go back to the state and show good intention of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do this, and underscoring it all by safety and understanding that. And I would add, as another piece of this, to look at the idea of the truck route. I'm not saying that we need to, but I think we should look at the options just to say what can make sense here in the whole scheme of things. So,
I just think the truck route is certainly a fine idea. It's separate of this intersection
understand.
process.
but it's tangential to some degree because
For sure.
it'll come up as,
Yep.
so I'm saying as a separate point tangential.
And I would say that on the historic look and feel of it's asphalt and granite curb. It's going to be asphalt and granite curb. We're not substantially changing the look and feel of the downtown. I think that's, it is
Well, and
what
I
it
think,
is.
yeah, to that point, getting all the different groups that are doing their thing, historical, so forth,
Cool.
so we will work on in here.
My name is Parker Harrison. I live on School Street, and I'm a member of the Bike Ped Committee. It seems to me, everybody seems sort of surprised by all this, which I find surprising. I know we pay more attention to it because we're on the committee, but it's been going on for a couple of years, and there were big public meetings, over at the community center. A lot of people got together, and then after that, in addition to consultants, there were a lot of townspeople that got involved in looking at the sites and coming up with recommendations, and it's gone through several iterations in terms of what's available. So I'm a little taken aback by the fact that we can't move ahead and meet this deadline fairly easily, because the original deadline, I believe, was last fall, and then it got kind of pushed
Last
or
December.
extended out.
Yeah, December was the original.
Right, so that's a full 6 months right there that already
Well-
is pushed out into it. And secondly, I'm a little confused by the approval of the funding. I thought we got approved for we had, I don't know, there were 7 or 8 projects at least. And not all of them were approved, but there was a number that certainly would cover the first 3 there, the intersection projects. So I'm confused as to what went on there.
The original estimates were not full design, and so they were not fully baked. So those numbers were low, significantly low, based on revised estimates of what this will cost. Not the new numbers. Those were the original numbers that you saw earlier on the screen. Those were the original estimates. So the updated estimates are probably almost double. You haven't seen those.
No. And that's part of the process, is getting this figured out financially. Yeah. Okay. All right, well, we've gone way past our time on this tonight, and I appreciate the feedback and information. So I would like to go forward with that. If anybody on the board has any further comments, do you want to talk?
Quick
about
one. On the C Street intersection, there were 2 alternatives. Are you going to bid out both of those, or are you going to pick one? crosswalk on one side, crosswalk on the other.
I think at this point we'd probably do an ad alternate.
What's that?
At this point, I think we'd probably prefer to do an ad alternate, so we bid both of them.
Okay.
I was going to say I don't have a preference. I would defer to you in public safety to pick where the
Yeah.
crosswalk ought to be.
So similar to, just as a punctuation point here, similar to what we just did with the Sawmill River, the dam thing, there were three clear options laid out in terms of cost, impact, the way it looked. Having coming back with those in terms of these projects would be very helpful. And a recommendation back from your work with all the different groups and the DPW back to get us to where we need to be. So once you get the money, the bids, well, I think that'll tell us a lot. So, any other comments from the board? If anyone here has any additional feedback or anyone, please get it to Greg in advance of March 4th and pursue our next steps. Okay, thank you. Do you want to just do a quick thing on the compost or?
Just so everybody's aware, we had a DP grant for a regional compost facility. Town meeting last year approved a match portion of that. We were looking at another match portion potentially for this fiscal year coming up. However, the initial report that we got back from our engineer for that design, also the grant is not going to be able to cover the estimate in that. So we're short. And so we're asking our consultant and the operator of our current compost site if there's any sort of cost saving feasibility or additional work. So, and step one of that is I'm going to have to ask DEP if they would extend that grant. It's unclear whether they will or they won't, but we were asked the question. If they extend it, then we'll keep working and see if we can come up with a reasonable approach that will be able to be funded. If not, then the project as a regional facility would probably go away for the time being, and we'd have to look into that as another project. And we would just continue our current operations as they are today.
All right, any other comments on that? Great, thank you. Thank you very much, thank you. All right, up next, a little on the late side, is our fire operations. Chief, if you wanna, is he here? Here he is. Come on up and join us. Thank you for attending tonight, we appreciate it. So this is a follow-up from our meeting last February 4th, where we did your after-incident report and talked about the 5 or 6 or 7 key items that you were addressing. I think you've made some good progress on that, and in addition, found a couple other options that you wanted to share with us. So love to hear your update, and thank you for coming.
Okay, well, thank you. Good evening to all. So since the fire, and since our last meeting, there's been quite a few different options that have come across my desk. And just to kind of give you some high level right now, if you have more questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Our biggest problem, as we all recognized, was water supply. And you can't make more water, but what's in the pipes is in the pipes. So we have to look at ways in which we can introduce more water, but from non-traditional sources. Now, non-traditional sources are if you have a lake, if you have a pond, which we really don't have any, that are of an adequate size to supply our pumps, but you do have tanker trucks. Our neighbors in Essex, they have a tanker, holds 2,300 gallons of water. When we get a call and it's a telephone report, rather than the dispatcher saying we have an alarm of fire, we hear her say, or him say, it's a telephone report of a fire in the house. That tells us we have an active fire on our hands. We need to make sure we got backup coming in. And I've spoken to the Essex chief, and he's in total agreement. Right now, when Essex comes over to Manchester, they send their ladder truck for station coverage. And what I have proposed is to change it up and have their tanker truck come over. That extra 2,300 gallons of water would give us a pretty good punch at knocking down a fire, or at least holding it at bay until we can get more reserves in here. And then talking with our District 5 control point in Beverly, talking to the chief dispatcher there, and we can get more tankers to come in. It's like a task force is how it's referred to. And that would come from Middleton and from Boxford. I've spoken to both of the chiefs in those towns, and they would have no problem that if we get a working fire over here, them sending their tanker trucks in. That's an extra 5,000 gallons of water. It gives us a real good punch. Obviously, the distance from Middleton to here, we're probably talking approximately 30 minutes for them to get here. Essex will be here pretty quick. They'll be here 10, 15 minutes in most cases. Boxford, with their big tanker, probably would be 30 to 45 minutes, depending upon the time of day. But that gives us an initial amount of water. Now, the other thing kind of way out there that I have been looking at is the potential of having a tanker truck that would be available for Essex, Gloucester, Rockport, and us. So 4 towns sharing in a tanker truck. Not exactly buttoned down exactly what size that we're looking at, whether it be a 2,000 gallon or a 2,500 gallon or a 3,000 gallons. But these are some options, and I've spoken with the chiefs in those communities over the past couple of weeks, what their feelings would be if we were to go in with basically a regional resource that could be shared amongst all 4 towns. All 4, well, including me, all 4 chiefs are very much in favor of it. It would certainly give us the opportunity to have quite a bit of extra water. And, you know, not that it's our community, but I hear, you know, Rockport or Essex or Gloucester go out, they get these fires in the swamp grass. And that is just a labor intensive task. And to have a tanker of 2,500 gallons available in addition to what they carry on the trucks, it's a great resource. You know, the other issue that would come up is, you know, where do we house it? How does it get here? I mean, those would be the types of issues once we can get an idea on closer on pricing and such, and really what the needs would be that would fulfill it. Then we could, you know, move forward with something like that. But that right now is
How much is a 2,500 gallon tanker truck, brand new?
approximately, and don't take me to task on it, but I've seen prices in the $200,000 range. Obviously, what comes into play is how you want to build this thing. How do you want it to look when it comes in the station? Is it going to be an elliptical tank that is on a conventional type of a chassis, like you see, like the Freightliners or over-the-road type trucks? That's the most feasible. That's the best bang for your buck type of a vehicle. And then do you put a pump on it, like a regular fire pump, or do you put like a small Honda pump? Basically, the purpose of a tanker truck in fire operations is to come in with a sizable amount of water, drop it into what's called a holding bag, and then the pumps at the scene will then take that water, transfer it from there up to the firefighting operation. And then you just keep running what they call tanker shuttle back and forth from a water resource, such as a hydrant, to where the bags are set up. And that just continues to go back and forth. Does that help you with it?
Just for context, how much is an advanced life support ambulance?
ALS ambulance, I believe we have 270,000 that we're asking for at town meeting.
Good. So you've got the pieces that we talked about, the shared tankers, and anything else on your list? I know we talked a little bit about the water lines and looking at those. And
Yeah, Chuck's been getting me some information on that, which is really in other conversations, Chuck, my gosh, we've been chatting at least a couple of times a week about this. Just where the issue lies, with the water, and you mentioned about Ocean Street and what University Way was. I mean, there's issues like that all around town, and it's not just that we have old pipes, but we also have locations that have long driveways. One place where we had a chimney fire the week before, the driveway was a half a mile long. We don't have that much hose. That's where operations such as a rural water supply, like I'm talking about here, would come in handy. Right now, there's a big training nut that would have to be accomplished going over to this kind of a setup, because we don't operate that way traditionally. We come to a hydrant, we have plenty of water there, and that's it. And it's a whole new concept with our folks, getting into what's involved, what kind of decisions have to be made, what are the logistics of getting enough apparatus, what type of apparatus. You know, these are type of things that are taken care of when we train.
Mhm.
And right now, in my job at the Fire Academy, I've designed a program that addresses this rural water supply. In fact, yesterday, that's what I was doing most of the day, was going through a rewrite of that program and thinking about, that looks like when we finish this up, something I'd like to bring here.
Yep.
Because it's a good start, because it gives you the classroom training on all the particulars and such, and then you take the second day of the class and you actually do it. You bring in the tankers from out of town. You run through a couple of evolutions so we can see how much water we can deliver in a relatively, short order.
That's great.
The other thing that I've been working with too is on our dispatch. Our dispatchers, you can't give them enough praise for what they do. That's one person that is taking all of these phone calls. And if you had heard the tape that I listened to from the day of the fire, that poor dispatcher had her hands full. And as you can be absolutely the world's most perfect dispatcher, but you're only one person. The incident commander at the scene is calling for stuff and equipment and so forth. When I went through, I think I looked at about a 15-minute span of time in the early stages of the fire, and this dispatcher was talking to 15 different fire trucks in that period of time, in addition to making calls to National Grid for the power, in addition to calling other resources in that we needed at the scene, like the DPW and such. We have what's called, we pay into the service with District 5 control to allow us at a greater alarm fire, we could transfer those type of operations with requesting equipment over to District 5 in Beverly. And I talked to the chief dispatcher there and I said, we get into a situation like this with a working fire. There's still the business of Manchester that has to continue, people calling in, asking questions and such. And I said, can we move it up? So instead of at a third alarm, we transfer those type of operations over to Beverly Control. Instead, we do it at a lower level and maybe at that working fire level. And he said, yeah, by all means, all your dispatcher has to do is call me on the radio and just say, can you take over from this point? And it's done. Not even a telephone call is needed, just because they're monitoring the radio. They're listening to what's going on. They know what's happening. So I haven't gone into very deep discussion with the police chief about that, because it would impact the operation there and when that all would take place. But it's just another way would relieve that person to make the operations there a little bit smoother and a little more helpful for them.
Great.
And I think that that pretty much covers the big topics that we're working on. All of them are pretty big topics.
Any questions from the board?
I would just first of all, thank you for all that you're doing. It's a great service to town, so thank you. I asked Greg earlier today, I think we need to get a little, just to help you further, with some more data about what percentage of residents and structures in town are tied to hydrants with less than 500 gallons per minute.
And that would be something that Chuck would have to.
Because my sense is that it's going to be at least 10% of the town. And if that's the case, I asked you intentionally about the advanced life support, because the percentage of the town that reasonably in an average year is going to have the need for that type of service is probably not a majority of the town. But we are probably going to have a greater number of people in houses with less than 500 gallons per minute of water access in an annual year. And I would say that one thing to look at is what happens if the town of Manchester just buys its own water tanker, if it's going to cost $250,000. We just saw a recommendation for a sidewalk that was going to cost $500,000. So I would prefer to have a water tanker than a sidewalk to Singing Beach if it's going to have people's houses burning down. And rarely do I ever think about what people pay in taxes, but I do think about it in relationship to what the town gets in receipts. And if we have certain houses burning down, there isn't a reason to tax people on their property as much. So I think that there is a financial implication of the town that we need to think about. Not out of any sort of preferential treatment to anybody in town, but more from a purely financial standpoint of the town. That's not my first priority by any means, but there's a number of factors here. I just think that we have a lot of people and structures in town that are at risk right now, as you know, you see it on a daily basis, and I think we need to, as a town, do more. I think you and the department are doing everything you possibly can, but if it's a question of cost, this is one cost that I would stand up and say I think the town should seriously think about. If I'm concerned that if we're getting tanker trucks from Middleton, that house on University Lane burned down in less than, the stories I've heard, it was less than 20 minutes. That thing was gone. And even if I think we get a tanker truck from Essex, I'm not sure it's going to be fast enough. And I'm very concerned about that kind of a fire happening in dry weather with wind. And out of complete respect to everything you guys did, it's out of your hands when nature takes over. And so I think the town should look at more if it's an issue of cost. In this particular case, rarely would I ever say that.
So I think the point is, and this is part of what we talked about last time, excellent progress. I think you've got some really good things happening. I think tying it in with the DPW, looking at some of these cost structures, if by the end of March, which is about a month or so away, to sort of get a final report of what, after all your research and conversation and looking into the context of the questions and what we need to do, that sort of gives us the roadmap for this.
Sure.
Because I really do think, to Arthur's point, there's always decisions and trade-offs. And when you come to the population, what we always hear loud and clear, safety is pretty much number one when it comes to health and obviously your home and fire and police. So when we look at those issues, we want to make sure that we have the best information and get what our professionals say we need in order to make those things happen and make that a priority. So Chuck, I think if you guys can continue to work together, and Greg, if we can pull something by the end of the month that answers the questions and sort of puts it all as sort of a capstone of everything we talked about with the path going forward. And I don't know if there's stuff that we need to impact in between for this town meeting.
So I think there is.
Okay.
And so I think sort of the three, they're not competing options, but three options. You talk about a tanker, you talk about the possibility of three large cistern tanks, firefighting storage tanks in key areas. And you look at upgrading the pipes.
Yeah.
So I think you need to sort of weigh sort of short-term, long-term of those three options and
Well,
decide.
I would
if
look
it's
at the tanker and the pipes together, because if the town is going to spend money to fix the pipes, and that's projected out over years, and we pay for our tanker now and sell it when those pipes get fixed and they're above 500 gallons per minute, you still are going to recoup a value of that tanker truck. The resale value of a tanker truck,
Yeah.
I'm sure, is not zero if we don't hold on to it for full depreciation.
Well, if I could just interrupt for just 1 second. The
Storage.
one thing you have to kind of be careful of is where are we going to park it?
Mm-hmm.
That's, our firehouse isn't that big. And trying to put a tanker truck in there under the current configuration, I know right off the bat, it will not fit.
Maybe chocolate cake space.
Home station would be a good spot for it.
But I think that's part of the thing, right, to figure out, is to say, if we were going to do something like that, where would it go? And is it feasible to, it may not be in the fire station, but where could it?
The biggest thing is getting, I have feelers out right now to the different companies to sit down with their salesmen, go over this, and then I'll be able to get the lengths and all those,
Exactly.
those type of figures that will
Yeah.
tell us,
Right.
all right, what do we need? Where
Right.
can it go?
Right, and that's why I think having that extra month to hopefully detail some of that. And again, short, mid, and long term, what can we do short term in the next, 6 months to a year? What do we need to do midterm, next year's season, and the longer term piece of this?
Exactly.
So
That's
whatever we can do to frame it up. But I think the key thing here is that's instructive. We had a tragedy on University. We want to respect what happened there, make sure that we hit and sort of go through the entire town to say where else and where are our hotspots and what can we do to deal with those short term as well as long term.
Right.
So, all right, Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one question about the tanker truck. So 2,500 gallons, if you've got a line that's running 500 gallons, 2,500 gallons to make up the shortfall, bringing it up to 1,000 is 5 minutes in absolute terms. But I'm sure that that's modified by how you use that truck. Question is, by what factor does a 2,500 gallon tanker truck make up 100% the shortfall of a 500 gallon line limit, or is it 50% of the way to where you want to be, or 80%? Can you qualify a little bit?
That is dictated by a lot of different factors. Where the fire is located, what the water flow is in that area we've been talking about. 2,500 gallons, if you kind of back up for a second and you look at an average 3,000 square foot house, 9,000 gallons of water will basically be what you need to fight a fire in a 3,000 square foot house. That's about the best way that I can put it.
Well,
And that's what we have.
That's true.
And what we
need to
have is
rethink the-
holding tanks, portable holding tanks that are carried on the apparatus. That's part of the tanker setup, the equipment that it carries. So it carries. You get a 2,000 gallon tanker. You get a 3,000 gallon bag that would be dropped in the street, and that would shuttle back and forth. Now, obviously, the incident commander in his tactical moves would have to figure out what's the best type of an attack to use, whether you go in a defensive mode or an offensive mode. And each fire is going to dictate what you do in those lines. So like, there's no one straight answer to say, yeah, it'll cover 50% or it'll cover 80%. I really couldn't give a fair guess to that.
That's fine.
Last time it would have been great. That 2,500 gallons, would have made a difference, but it wouldn't have changed the outcome. Outcome would have been the same.
So based on that, and Chuck, if we can, I would like to. I think everyone would like to know is what is the percentage of residents tied to hydrants with less than 1,000 gallons per minute, and how many structures? What percentage of structures in town is that? Because I'm not expecting you to.
On the list.
Can you bring your abacus? Yeah. Well, it's all the edges. It's the periphery of town. It's the extent. It's the ends of all the lines. And so there's the question is how many people represent, what percentage of the population of residents are represented at those endpoints, and how many structures are they relative to the total number of structures in town? Because that, we have to look at it in the confines of the fire budget, but we also need to look at it in the perspective of the entire town. I mean, I think we need to make sure that that department has everything they possibly need at any moment within reasonable circumstances. But it is tied to the issue of fixing the lines, and I think I would argue that we look at it as investments, and we're going to be making investments in the pipes. It's coming no matter what we do. And again, there's operational realities of a tanker truck that I don't understand. But if it ever comes down to an issue of cost, if that ballpark number is true, that's in the grand scheme of the town budget and all the things we're going to be spending money on, that's not actually a lot of money. Especially if it's done in short term, pipes are fixed, you're still doing it in the window of depreciation. There is a recoupable value of that truck if in fact it dovetails with when the pipes are fixed in certain parts of town.
And there's also manufacturers out there that also offer leasing options as well. I've done that in other communities to lessen the impact on the budget.
I'm just encouraging you to. I appreciate all the things that you've done, especially since the fire. But I would say that we should look at all options, including things on our own. I'm not saying we necessarily go that route, but I think we should evaluate it, especially if we've made other investments of similar.
Like I said, once I can get have a couple of salesmen get in front of me and I can get an idea of what are we talking about, what's this thing going to look like? And that's where I've done a little bit of research online, and that's where I come up with the 200,000 number. So I don't know, it could be less or more.
Well, it all comes through and playing out that way. Great. Okay. All right. I think that's good for tonight. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thanks. All right. I think you're done now, Chuck. Thank you. All right. Okay.
Just one more thing, Chuck.
Yeah, one more thing. I was kidding. All right, we're going to bring up petition articles next. I need to just get a drink of water. I'll be right back. Come on up front for petition articles, those that are presenting. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right. Greg, you want to tee us up on this? And
So we've received two petition articles. They've been verified to meet the requisite numbers of signatures. One is to have a question before the voters whether or not they want to continue to add fluoride to the drinking water supply. And then another petition article is to create a new bylaw that would ban various plastics from the food establishments. So the one, the plastic ban, expanding the plastic ban would be a bylaw, so there'd be a binding article. The fluoride petition was presented as a non-binding question. So we have folks from both petitioners are here, so I think they would be willing to give an overview, and you can ask some questions.
great, good. Okay. Would you like to start? Yeah, okay.
Thank you. So 803 residents voted no in 1982 Manchester referendum on fluoridation, and their right to determine their own individual medical treatment was taken away by 1,130 residents who voted to add fluoride. How can this be legal, and how can this be ethical? The 803 residents are now forced to drink fluoridated water that worsens their health, or purchase filtered or spring water in plastic bottles. It's ethically wrong to mandate a drug for all when some are opposed. Now in 2019, we have more information about the harmful effects of fluoridated water. Based on dozens of peer-reviewed scientific studies by accredited sources published in this decade, which I gave you copies of, demonstrate harm from low fluoride concentration in pets, people, and plants. Based on that, several of us requested the Selectmen to perform their due diligence and take the steps to end fluoridation in January 2018. They are the only ones with the authority to initiate that process under Massachusetts law. Here is a review of timeline as to why we are here now with the citizen petition question for town meeting to remove fluoride. The Selectmen deferred their decision to act on removing fluoride to the Board of Health. The Board of Health advised the science is a massive undertaking and not within the scope of our concern. We are not experts and we will not take action. Despite their admitted lack of scientific expertise, the Board of Health claimed fluoride is a nutrient. The Board of Health suggested bringing this issue to a town meeting vote. To be clear, our DPW, who manages the water plant, states fluoride is an industrial-grade chemical, and this same product is labeled as used as an insecticide, and labels do not release into sewers and waterways, as stated on the Material Safety Data Sheet, MSDS, available at the DPW. This is not a pharmaceutical grade or food grade product. Label on the bag states poison, toxic, danger, fatal if swallowed. We believe a non-binding vote in town meeting asking our neighbors to vote their opinion if it is a poison, drug, or a nutrient added to the public water supply is immoral and unethical. Why do our neighbors get to play doctor? What happened to the individual freedom of health care, sovereignty of our bodies? What happened to informed medical consent? Our Board of Health did not want to inform the public where or how this fluoride is made. It is harvested from pollution control systems of factories in Shanghai, as stated on the bag, as stated also on the Material Safety Data Sheet. The Board of Health states, we don't want to alarm the public. The Board of Health did not want the public to see the photos of the bags of fluoride, which show the skull and bones, poison, toxic, and fatal if swallowed. Town leaders, Please tell me what is the exact dose required for each of my family members who are bottle-fed infants, athletes, and the elderly. Many studies, including one in 2018, document that bottle-fed infants in America exceed even the upper safe limits of fluoride consumption when their formula is made with optimally fluoridated tap water. A 2015 Cochrane review of 262 pro-fluoridation studies concluded these papers determine that fluoridation does not reduce cavities to a statistically significant degree. You have all those studies. If you are overwhelmed by the science, consider the statements of neuropharmacologist and Nobel laureate Dr. Arvid Carlsson, who in his role of National Science Advisor to the government prevented fluoridation in Sweden. He said the use of public drinking water to supply to administer a drug goes against all principles of science because individuals, even if we were able to control the dose, respond very differently to any kind of drug or toxic substance. Fluoridation is obsolete. And safe water advocate Aaron Brockovich says a public water supply is not a pharmacy. It is criminal to add fluoride to the water, period. And human rights activist and environmental attorney Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who recently said in January 2019, fluoridation is a significant chemical assault on our children's developing bodies and brains. Fluoridation needs to end. And lastly, our wonderful super athlete Tom Brady states in his book, TB12, page 208, excessive amounts of both fluoride and chloride now have been linked to a number of health risks. Selectmen, we hope that you reconsider your position and petition the state for a home rule exemption to Chapter 111, Section 8C, in order to remove the fluoride from our municipal water. The fluoride statistics, 95% of the world does not fluoridate. 97% of Europe does not fluoridate. 73% of Massachusetts towns, cities, do not fluoridate. The entire county of Berkshire, Franklin and Cape Cod towns do not fluoridate. I was amazed when I heard that, Cape Cod, not one town. And I've talked to people there and they say, why would we put poison in the water? So they love their water. And 80% of Vermont towns do not fluoridate, 81% of Maine towns, and 63% of New Hampshire towns do not fluoridate. Thank you very much. And I got all the fluoride statistics from the CDC, if you want the link. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Could I add couple little comments? My name is Alan McMillan, and I'm on the anti-fluoride committee in the town of Rockport, and we are addressing the same issue in our town at our spring town meeting. To put this in perspective for the layperson, you drink 1 glass of water a day, I drink 10 glasses of water a day. I'm getting 10 times the dose of fluoride that you are, which means either I'm being poisoned or the rate isn't enough to have any effect. The rate, I'm being poisoned because twice since 1981 the government has lowered the amount of fluoride put into the water. And sodium fluoride, which is put in your drinking water, Gloucester's drinking water, and Rockport's drinking water, is an industrial compound. It is a byproduct of the fertilizer industry and the aluminum industry. It's a waste product. It is deadly poison. This bag right here, see class 6.1, class 6.1, and this is the United States Department of Transportation warning label. It is a deadly poison that falls between lead and arsenic. It is a deadly poison that's been put in your drinking water. I can't drink the tap water because I have thyroid disease. This exacerbates thyroid disease. We had a panel discussion in Rockport 4 years ago, run by the Board of Health, which is 100% in favor of fluoride. They would only take questions from the audience if you were written in advance. And a woman sitting next to me wrote in the question, if I'm breastfeeding my baby, can I transfer fluoride from the drinking water to my baby? The lead doctor from Boston, from the Massachusetts Dental Association said, quote, I've never been asked that question before. I don't know. The Board of Health in your community does not know everything about health. There are 18 Nobel Prize winners across the world that have said this is a bad thing for you. But I go back again. If you drink 1 glass of water, I drink 10, I'm being poisoned. And you're paying for the town of Manchester could save between $5,000 and $10,000 a year not putting poison into drinking water. And if you're voting to continue fluoridating water, you're voting to poison some of your town residents. That's something.
Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, Gary Gilbert? You got your, yep, you're
Can you hear me?
number two on the petition article.
Um, well, basically, I think of this, I'm beginning to think of this more, it's less of a ban and more of a new requirement. And the requirement really is, in as much as we use single-use plastics in town, they just need to become recyclable or compostable. Sort of boils down to just that. And there are plenty of products out there to do this. And I could talk about sea turtles and whales, but you don't want to hear about that. I can say that as of this date, I've spoken to Callas, Bravos, Richdale's, Essen, and Black Arrow. And given them information, I want to give you this, which is a copy of the law, as well as 4 pages of resources where they can go to get alternatives. I don't know if I gave this to you last time, but I don't think so. 4 pages of resources, including one specifically for cutlery, but all sorts of products. And at the end, there's a very nifty graphic that someone made. I got through the statewide network of people that work on these issues, and you could make a great poster. And I've gotten some, no real issues or nobody was alarmed. I gave them my email address, all of them, so they could ask questions because there's some details in all this. And I guess I'd ask you what questions you guys have.
So I would, just to confirm, Greg, the petition that's in our packet is the current petition that
Yes.
coming forward. Okay, so if everyone's had a chance to look at that.
Well, I would add one thing. I would like to, we'll probably make little changes between now and town meeting, I assume, but I'd like to shorten the time period to enact this to 3 months, because nobody's got space to store a lot of this stuff. It's pretty bulky. Everybody's got like a matter of weeks or a month worth of supplies, and they have regular people that come in a couple times a month that buy their Ridgedales, was just telling me. So they don't have big stockpiles of it. There's no need like the plastic bag thing was for 6 months of phase-in time. 3 months will be more than adequate.
Have you spoken to all the business owners, Gary?
I have just the list I told you. Black Arrow, no, is it Black Arrow? No, Callas has, this is bioplastic. This is a straw, better than paper, I think. It's just like a plastic straw, but it's made, it's number 7, PLA. It's made from organic materials. And Black Arrow has this, Black Arrow does, he said, I don't even need to see it. I'm already complying. He's got paper straws, and these are paper takeout containers with a thin film of PLA, the friendly plastic, as a water sealant liner to it. So luckily, unlike with the plastic bag ban, there's a lot of products out there to turn to.
So,
What is-
okay.
I was just going to say, is there a huge cost difference for the businesses? And don't get me wrong, I am 100% for that myself. But thinking, from a business, is it a prohibitive expense for them?
I have an Excel spreadsheet I recently got where one of the towns in Massachusetts actually made a big Excel spreadsheet costing out all the different products, or most of the products. And I can give that to any business that's interested, or you, if you want to see it. It's going to cost somewhat more. But if you use your base point of comparison to, the miracle of chemistry, we had plastic bags. They were like free, they cost almost nothing. But if you reflect on something like that, or these plastic knives, forks, and spoons, that shouldn't necessarily be the base point of comparison. We lived decades in our country just ignoring the impact of these things. I think the baseline is, I don't see a problem, just like lumberyards charge a delivery fee now, even though gas prices have gone down. If you have a takeout order, maybe they charge you $1 for a takeout fee. Little packages, assemblages of knife, forks, spoons, and napkins that comply with this, I've seen prices from 35 cents to 65 cents. Mm-hmm. Most of us that take the takeout go home and eat with our own knives, forks, and spoons. We don't even use them. So it's one of these things you have to put it in perspective. And the problems being caused are huge. I won't elaborate on them because I'm sure you'd be bored. But it's either, you tackle the problem or you don't. And there will be some impact, but I don't think it's huge.
And I get that. I do understand that. But I'm just trying to be sensitive to um, are the businesses in town. And believe me, everything you've said, I know, I understand, but I don't sit up here just for myself. And that's why, I mean, when you say you've spoken with them, and Black Arrow, as I know, already does that, and Callis has those wonderful straws, what about Bravo?
I've spoken to Bravo. She said she was more or less in favor. She smiled and said, yeah, in a week or two, I could switch over. Maybe it'll take them time to appreciate the cost differences. I'm not quite sure. But I think it's the cost of doing business to some extent. And there's some real reasons behind supporting it.
Have you reached out to the new owners at 7 Central just where they're looking at some kind of a spring opening so that they're not?
I don't know how to get in touch with
blindsided?
them. The
I
big,
wonder if that's something, is there contact information maybe?
Yeah, we have contact information.
Yeah. I just,
no, I'd like to.
yeah.
I think
know that
Crosby's,
the Salem restaurant uses compostable containers already.
Oh, they already do.
But
I
I
just
don't know
feel like
about
where
everything
they're
else.
gonna be the newest in town.
Yeah, I'm not sure about straws or
the
whatever.
bigger issue is going to be with Crosby's and their food packaging. And
Mhm.
Allison, the chair of the Sustainability Committee, and I are going to descend upon Crosby's hopefully tomorrow and talk with the manager. But then the manager is just the local manager, not the regional manager.
Right.
So some feedback may take a little time lag to get back to us. But I think it's something you do or you don't do it. And it's one of those things.
I think it's great that you're taking the initiative on that. I also think from a public engagement perspective from the town, seeing that we have a petition article that's coming before town meeting, there should be some notification across the board, which I know there will be, but particularly to anybody who would be impacted by this, to just have them be aware that this petition is coming forward. It's on our town warrant for town meeting in April. And all the research you're doing and work is great, but I just want to make sure from a town perspective, they know that. And we have, I mean, our letter goes out and talks about all the articles that we have. So obviously it would include the Florida one too.
That's why I'm actually giving them a copy of the law.
Yeah.
I'm going to complete the list, which
Yeah.
is the pharmacy,
Yeah.
sells styrofoam. Richdale has styrofoam coolers,
Yeah.
but they know that, about this now. So Crosby's, the pharmacy, and the future owner of 7 Central. Well, I'm missing somebody. The canteen.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know who manages that.
That's, Parks and Rec in town. They
contracted out to,
contract
to Bruce.
Bruce Warren.
Warren, thank you.
If, okay, Bruce.
Bruce.
I'd be happy to send you a digital copy of a handout of the
Yeah.
bylaw
That
and
would be great.
everything, and maybe you could send that to them.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely in favor of everybody being
Being
knowing
aware.
about this
That's all
before
I'm just
town meeting,
saying.
of
We
course.
should have people aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay. Elon?
I do agree that Crosby's is an important one to contact, in part because a lot of you and I might take a thing of soup home to eat, but a lot of people, workers, go in there and get their lunch, and they
Mhm.
probably take utensils with them. There were 2 points about the article in particular I wanted to, administration side. Section 43B, food and retail establishments will be exempted, blah, 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 if the Department of Health Director or designee finds a suitable alternative. So in other words, the Department of Health Director is the arbiter of exemptions to this, right? And the question, and then the police department is the enforcement agency. And I wondered have you talked to the Department of Health about that? Are they aware that they're going to be the arbiter of exemptions? And have you talked to the Department of Health and the police department to see how that enforcement dynamic would work? And then if somebody doesn't like the result of the exemption, what is their appeal process? Does it eventually get up to the board here, or are they dead on arrival if the Department of Health says no?
Okay, plastic bag ban, the enforcement agent was on the advice of town council was to have the policeman. So I just mimicked that. Department of Health is in there, not because I know them, but because most towns refer to them. Personally, I think the DPW has more of an engineer's mind behind this, and I think that the ASTM standards are a little bit more, I don't know, there's more chemistry and engineering behind it. Both of them should would probably be competent. I sort of was looking to you guys for input on exactly that point. I don't really know, so I know I haven't talked to them because I'm not quite sure what the best thing to do is. Perhaps Greg could facilitate a meeting and I could sit down with someone from whoever's appropriate and just talk about the intricacies of it.
Well, and I do anticipate, to Eli's point, there will be questions at town meeting about administration and enforcement, because that's something that typically comes up.
I would note that it's less, there's less of a enforcement hammer than in the plastic bag ban. The idea here is not to punish people, but to just get them to comply. And the fines are like, I've forgotten what I wrote down here, but it's like pretty lenient. It's like
$50.
50 and
first,
100.
in like 30 days or something. It's not like every single day you have to pay another $50. It's
But I think, yeah, just to be.
in this town, everyone's friendly. I
comprehensive.
think they're happy to comply once it's a law.
All right, any other questions from the board on this?
But appeal, it would be a good idea to see if I could find a place to, if somebody wants to appeal the decision of whoever's the enforcement agency, I think it's a good idea to maybe add a sentence about that.
All right. And, I think we're good. Any other comments? Yes, sure.
A couple of procedural comments, Gary. One, it sounds as though there may be differences between the article and what you present at town meeting. And if that's the case, we need to talk, you and I should talk about how to present that in a way that makes it clear and understandable simply to the voters. And the other thing is, if it's going to be substantially different, it may raise a question whether it's within the scope of the warrant. We don't want to do that. No.
Yeah.
It's complicated enough.
Yeah.
And this has been tried and tested in other towns in the past, almost the same verbiage. I actually made it simpler than Brookline's, I think, easier to read. But the scope is going to be the same.
Yeah, the scope is a different question, because if you depart too far from what's in the article, then I have to disallow it.
Okay. While we have you, Alan, on this topic, any other procedural questions or anything for our board folks, or anything that you need to frame up, or good with both the citizen?
No, I think there may be a question that I'll ask town council to talk about, which is what the procedure is under state law to change fluoridation. A non-binding vote at town meeting won't initiate that process, as I'm sure you know.
Mm-hmm. So we just have that answer, right? Okay.
I want the voters to be clear on what
Yes.
they can and cannot do with it.
Thank you. All right, Greg, do we have another topic we wanted to address on the articles? We had that.
Yeah, so the local room tax is now an option to impose on transient guests, so the folks who are using Airbnb type services. That's an option. So we've never implemented the local room taxes because we only had one
Yeah.
bed and breakfast in town. And so now with this amendment to the law, you have the option of imposing that local tax on short-term rentals in homes.
Are people doing that? Are we registering folks? Do we have the short term?
So most people are not registering because they're saying they're renting for a whole week.
Right.
So our bylaw said that if you
Right.
do it for more than a week, you don't have to register.
But this would impact them
Yes,
regardless.
regardless. Yes. This requires people who are renting to register with the state.
Yep.
Because the state will be collecting the state excise tax.
And then we get a piece of that.
No, only if we impose our local.
this. Right. Okay, all right.
So the landscape is changing regardless.
Yep.
And you have the option of asking the voters to
Going to local.
do a local tax. So it's up to 6%. It can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6.
What are other communities doing at this point?
Most communities that have adopted local rooms tax, do the full 6%. It's awfully early to see who's amending it to include, well, actually, it's automatic for towns that have already adopted it, I believe. I have to double check that. But anyways, it's very early on. I don't know of other towns that have adopted it yet. I know that a lot of towns were lobbying for the local option, so I would expect many towns to do it. Certainly many of the Cape towns, many of the Berkshire towns. I'm sure Boston will be doing it. So there's two parts. One is adopting the room tax and imposing the percentage tax on short-term rentals. And then there's also the option, again, it's an option, of imposing an additional impact fee on commercially operated residential rentals. So if someone has 3 or 4 units that they're renting out in town, you can impose an additional tax impact fee on that. It's up to 3% more. Again, you don't have to do that. If you do it, I think it was 35% of that tax has to be put aside for affordable housing or infrastructure projects.
So I'm sorry, was that for short term or not short term?
It'd be for short term.
Only.
All of these are short term only, meaning 31 days or less.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, except the corner inn would have to impose the same tax.
The what?
The corner inn would have to impose that
Right.
same tax.
Yeah. And regardless of whether or not their stays were 31 days, and I have no idea how many people.
Right. So they're commercial room
Yeah.
lodging establishments.
So it's this year that the state is going to be imposing 5%, 5.7% on the short-term rentals.
Yes.
So if we adopted this, we'd be summing on up to 11.7%.
Correct.
As high as that. You don't have to go as high as that.
So when we have the article as it looks right now, it's stating at the rate of 6% or at the rate of 3%.
Right, but that you don't have to go with that full amount. That's the maximum you can ask for.
Okay, so this is just a basic article, and we would decide what percentage? If we were, is that something that would be done on?
You should propose
Okay.
a percentage that the voters would consider.
So my concern is we have a month or about to get to town meeting in March, and
Right,
I'm
so
just
you-
wondering,
You could decide to wait for the fall town meeting on this one.
yeah, I don't know, what do you guys think? I'm a little worried about trying to squeeze this into a 30-day.
Yeah.
I think
Period.
it's something that warrants consideration, but it's the hearing process and the communications piece and
Mm-hmm.
first.
Yeah, because this is a big number to jump up. Okay,
Yeah.
you agree? So I think, do we agree that we want to pursue the details of it, understand, the who, what, when, what? I'm interested in knowing how many it impacts, what we
Right.
would see,
Right.
what the projected revenue would be from it, from a local, you go through all of this, is it worth it? Is
Right,
it
it's hard to get a
difference?
clear handle on that because we don't know for sure, and we have a sense of who's advertising.
Yeah.
And this is up to almost, this is 12% here plus the 5.7, so it's already 17.7, percent, which is, I think, a lot of money for.
Right, and you don't have to do that. You could do,
Right, I'm just saying, if it were to
Right.
go to the maximum, that's a lot.
Is it also something that we could enact later? In other words, if the state goes in this year, could we come back to it and enact it, or is this a one-time shot?
no, you can enact this at any time.
Okay, that's what I did. All right,
And,
well,
and if you were to enact it, you can also alter the percentage.
similar to what we would do with the CP, yeah.
Yes.
All right, I think though, for this round of town meeting, I would just soon hold and work on it over the course of the summer, bring it to the fall if it makes sense. Make sense? No, no, that's right. You don't have, I can't look at you. You have no opinion on that whatsoever. Okay, all right. Anything else on petition articles? Anything in general, guidance? No? All right. Just quickly on the board training update, we handed out, and I sent something earlier today about sort of the general pieces that we did from our board training. We ran 2 events.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Alan. Take care. 2 events at the end of middle of January, I guess, and had probably, what did we say, 30, 50 something?
We had about 50
38,
people.
50 people or
30 and
so.
25, so
Yeah.
yeah, over 50.
Over 50 folks that joined. And I think overall we learned a lot from those first 2, just in terms of what makes sense and what doesn't. But what we came out of was realizing that we don't do much to train our boards or our volunteers when they come on. And I think part of the challenge is we assume that institutional knowledge floats down from the chair or people on the committee. It's very informal. So what we're suggesting is having a rotation where from starting in the spring, when you start appointing boards, and in May, when the elected boards or elected officials come on board, by the June timeframe, everyone is sworn in. When they're sworn in, they actually get a handbook that takes them through the governance, the way everything works, the roles and responsibilities, the different pieces. So as they're signing in for their open meeting law and their ethics training, they'll actually have a handbook. In mid-June timeframe, before the summer sessions start, having an opportunity to bring the new member gathering together so people can meet each other. We're trying to kind of, I would say, integrate our boards and working together a little bit better so that people understand, well, what does the planning board do? What does the zoning board do? How do we begin to educate on that? And then every fall, we have a kickoff for a Train the Trainer with the vice chairs and the chairs, and we basically give them the tools to go back to their boards and go through the ethics and all of the different pieces that we covered in those meetings. So once a year, and even though it gets a little boring for people who've been around a long time, there's always some piece of that. And then the technical side of it, obviously, for the more judiciary-facing boards or quasi-judiciary, that they've got a ways to be able to have that be focused in on the roles and responsibilities that they have. So we gave examples of this. We talked about some improvements that we're doing, but conceptually, I wanted to see what you folks thought in terms of the rhythm, the content. We're going to be massaging that. We'll send it certainly back to people. But we'd really like to get this going for this spring so that we can kick it off. Any comments, thoughts?
Yay.
Okay. Get in here. Okay.
I do think we need to couple this with some supplemental guidance on the structure of committees in town government. And how do we want it to work? Once these people go through training, once they're serving on a committee, are they clear on the role of the committee relative to town government? Not just how they act on a committee, but what they try to conduct on a committee.
What advisory was recommending?
How do they bring motions forward, path to some sort of resolution if that's what they're trying to do,
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. That should be added in. All right, any other thoughts? All right. So we'll proceed as forward, add that piece to it, and you'll be seeing everything before it goes out. So, all right, thanks. Okay. Budget update.
So again, things are coming together fairly nicely, though we did have a bit of a hiccup. So easy come, easy go in some respects. So we did well on our health insurance renewal this year. We actually have a rate decrease, which I don't think anyone has seen in, oh boy, over a decade, if not longer. Unless we did see a decrease when we switched plans, but it's very helpful. So that 3.9% decrease in the rate represents roughly $50,000. But we just got the new vocational bill, vocational tech school, and we're sending 4 new students. So that eats up that savings. So we didn't have those savings very long in our hands.
No, but I will say it's nice that our students have options.
Um, so
How
that
does that translate to the school budget?
it doesn't,
It doesn't.
in a sense. I mean, they have 4 fewer students.
Right, that's what I meant, right?
Uh,
The enrollment figures now go down further.
right.
And we know what the cost effective of school committee versus the school budget.
No, I can't tell you dollar for dollar. I mean, obviously we have a per student cost, but they would say that by losing 4 students, you're not saving those dollars.
Oh, yeah, clearly, yeah. I'm just trying to see if this, is there, I don't know the answer. I'm just curious.
Right.
Is there any repercussion effects on a situation which already seems sensitive in their planning?
Right, right. I mean, it helps them absorb any surprises come September in terms of higher enrollment, perhaps. It gives them a little more capacity.
Quite honestly, it ends up a wash.
Yeah, that-
I mean, the chance of 4 kiddos moving into the community in the summer,
No, it's good to have.
taking those seats is
Right.
high.
Uh, So that's there. The 3 major issues that I saw that needed further discussion, capital, particularly in light of a desire to beef up fire flows in the water system, and or tanker, depending on how that plays out. And talk a little bit about the staffing that we have budgeted and feedback on the possibility of having a community out engagement and communications coordinator as a part-time position. And then the third major topic was the use of the estimated receipts, boosting that up in order to keep the tax rate from increasing the full 2.5%.
So I want to have that discussion about those 3 in general, but from a timeline perspective, when is our meeting? What's the date of our meeting for the final budget and everything that we need to?
So we need to finalize everything by the 4th.
Okay, so March 4th is the deadline.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was.
For which?
March
For the
4th,
budget.
The budget. Okay. Yeah. All right.
So March
So,
4th, we'll vote the budget.
Right.
Thank you.
So March 4th, you vote the budget and make your recommendations on the various articles.
I don't think that means- Oh, yeah. You can always get feedback from me.
We'll count on that. All right, okay.
Can I ask a question?
Will
on
everybody
the-
else be here though? Because we have to make sure we have a quorum.
on the
4th? Yeah.
Well, I'm actually scheduled not to be.
Oh,
But
okay.
if March 4th is the drop dead date, I will reconsider that.
So alternatively, you meet next week. We can't go past the 4th.
No, right, so the 4th.
So in terms of printer, and
You're not here next week. He's not here for the next 2, so is next
He-
week
He's
better?
not here, you're not here on the 4th?
4th.
Okay, well, yeah. And I can rearrange what I'm supposed to be at on the 4th, but there's a penalty for that.
For you or for us?
For me. If
Is it better to do it next week?
if we can do it either side, well, if it's got to be before the 4th, then yes.
we could do it the
Not gonna be here on
5th.
the 4th either.
No, I'm actually at RSA.
Okay. So
The 5th?
probably, it seems like it'd be good to have a full board present for that, and, other discussions, so.
I could do the 5th.
Hmm?
Is that what we're talking about, the 5th? Or the 25th?
25th has to be before the 4th, next week.
Or we could do it a little later in the week if that's,
You're
In
gone
terms of-
both weeks, right? Next week and the following?
Yes.
I'm fine either next week or the 4th, so I guess it's really gating on you both, what works best for you.
I am, I'm back to 7.
That you were out the 25th.
I have something going on the 25th. It'd be better if it was the 26th.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because the 25th, yeah, I can't be.
Right.
Right. Thank you for reminding me. I'm glad we've got everybody covered here.
So are we looking at the,
I could do the 26th or the 27th.
Those are fine with me.
I can do either of those. I will happily
Yeah,
rearrange.
and the
I could-
something on the 26th, the 27th, yeah.
I could do the 28th too. Anybody can do the 28th?
I cannot do the 28th.
So
So,
26th,
yeah, 26th and 27th.
27th better, Greg? Is that a FinCom meeting?
So that is a FinCom meeting. I'm hoping they're, well,
Well, they
Uh,
want to hear from us before they have their meeting probably, so we should do the 26th.
if the 26th work, that's probably best.
Okay, all right, so the
Yep.
26th, so we do not do it on the 4th.
And is it just voting the
Just
budget
budget.
and?
But we would still meet the 4th for other business.
Do we have other things we have to do?
I'm sure something will, don't we have something else?
Yeah, we're interviewing.
Yeah.
In one meeting?
Oh, it's been advertised. yeah.
Okay, all right, so we'll do the 4th, but
When
we'll
you talk about
hold
the
it.
4th, doing the follow-up to this
Yeah.
street intersections.
Yeah. All right, so let's do this. We'll do the, it's actually good that the budget's separate from that because that would be a very long meeting. So we'll do the budget on the 26th.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do what's on the agenda for the 4th. And we'll go from there. Now, the question on the 4th is, we'll only have 3 members. So we'll not have them.
So who's on besides Eli?
Arthur's not here.
Arthur's not? Okay.
Yeah, we
Two
can't
people
vote.
here.
We can't vote. It's not-
I'll be back to 7th, if that helps in any way.
I'll be back the 5th.
Are you on the 7th? Are you?
No, I'm here the 7th.
You're not.
There's a slim chance that I would be, there's a slim chance that I actually won't be pinned down in the 4th. I think
You
it's
don't
Mike's
want to
job.
plan on that.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to stay with the 4th because there's a tree here.
Yeah.
So we know.
All right, so we have to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
All right, let's just
So
hold it
now
at
where
that.
are we at?
And
February?
so we're meeting on the, we're gonna meet on the
26th.
26th, which is Tuesday, for the budget. We're going to meet on the 4th for our public hearing, interviews, and follow-up to the complete streets, if we're doing a public hearing that night. So that's where we are,
Okay.
okay?
So I think in terms of complete streets, I think we'll take the input, but I think final decisions will await
To our next meeting.
budget, the results of the bidding and all
Of
of that.
course.
So,
Yeah.
so it's not that we're making a decision on the
No,
floor.
yes,
So
exactly. It's
I
really
just-
just hearing what the public,
Right.
yes, it's garnering that. So that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, okay. And then we'll have minutes and report outs on that anyway. All right, I'm good with that. Okay. All right, so now that we've got the schedule down,
Can I go back and ask a question about
yes, you
water?
can.
So, there were little hand wavy references to putting more money, potentially putting more money into water. And the question I had is, well, we've kind of gone back and forth about how much water work we do in a given year. It was the first year, essentially the first year where we really started putting money into water. And we ripped up a lot of roads and we really went after water. And after we had gotten through the summer on that, we had some pushback from the residents saying that was a little much. And so we decided that we actually needed to scale back our approach to doing waterworks work in the year and do things a little slightly more targeted and less dramatic fashion. Are we going the other direction, or what does the new picture of next year's waterworks look like under the thinking of your new budget?
So under the under the more aggressive plan, it would be, in addition to Ocean Street, it would be doing Raymond Street for a replacement of a pipe, and also Magnolia Ave. So Raymond is a fairly heavily trafficked road, but I would say
it's like
Magnolia
back in
is
the
not.
south, yeah.
And Ocean Street is there's a lot of recreational traffic.
But Raymond Street and Magnolia are not through streets, so they're
Correct.
not the transit lanes that everybody uses to get.
That's my point. Yeah.
Right, but I think depending on the timing of the
Mhm.
Main Street work impacts the beach traffic that accumulates along
Right. You would do Ocean
Club.
either first thing in the spring, or you'd wait until the fall.
The same with
Um,
the
Raymond.
timing.
Is
You
this, getting, not to hit the drum again, but I have to. Like, are we applying the lens of how many residents? Because it just seems like Ocean Street, well, I love Ocean Street, and I, get a lot of attention lately. We've got other neighborhoods that are at less gallon per minute. And I just would like to see some weighting of number of residents per each of these hydrants.
Right. So if you do Magnolia, that will improve significantly University Lane. Now, it may be that we can do a relining on University Lane as well. I don't think you need to replace the pipe on University Lane. I think
Yeah,
that's
I'm not necessarily, my knee jerk is not necessarily University, while I do appreciate what just took place there. I mean, we've got a lot of other potential areas, so I'd just like to see some numbers behind the order of these things.
Yeah, we can do that.
There's data that should dictate some of our decision making if we are gonna go ahead and spend.
What was
Traffic, the disruption to traffic flow for sure is one, but we should also be looking at how many residents are we talking about, how many structures are we talking about, so that we get the most coverage for the dollars we're spending.
Right.
What was the current reason to prioritize Ocean Street?
Just that pipe is sitting in salt water, and it's in danger of failing. So we've done half of it. And so the idea was to do the second half. But in terms of a fire flow perspective and number of structures, it wouldn't rise to the top.
Well,
I don't get any easy answer.
also though, it's interesting that, just for example, looking up at Plum Hill, where I know they've also added some more houses in there. According to the existing fire flow map, it looks like there's next to nothing for firefighting up in that area where new houses have been being added. And when I look at this map, there are a lot of what are either private or abandoned roads that don't appear to have any fire hydrants or anything on them. And how are those handled in case of a fire emergency?
So in terms of a forest fire or something?
Well,
or-
no, where there are houses. There are homes.
The truck, I would imagine. I mean, and then they're laying poles from a nearby hydrant.
But I'm looking, for example, out near, I guess that's maybe, is that Coolidge Point?
Well, I think that was Dal's point, that there are
There's
places.
some private hydrants
Yeah,
out there.
there are places in the community that the
Okay,
hose isn't gonna reach.
but there
as far
are,
as it needs to.
but there are also some, Plum Hill's that's not a private road.
Right, so on the Plum Hill, so Chuck has a plan that he's working on.
Okay, but I'm just saying, to what Arthur is saying, I think that makes sense to see, try and kind of get an overall assessment.
Right, so I think what Chuck will do is you give him a number and he'll tell you the best way to spend it.
Okay.
So my question to you is, what kind of a number would you like to strive for?
Let's get, I think, lesson learned for the town is let's get that number influenced by fire. So if there's a
Yeah.
coordinated recommendation about how to spend, we aren't just spending in isolation. It's
No, I
got-
understand. That's what this would do. That's
Yeah.
what Chuck is and Al are doing.
So that's what we talked about, and then we were talking about,
Right.
is bringing our plan together. So I think the answer to the question in terms of spending for the capital and the water and all of that is, can we get that close enough by next week to get a feel for what we should do relative to this in the budget? That's going to be the question.
So I'm not going to, so Chuck's away all next week. So I'm not going to give you a whole lot more information on priority pipe. In talking to him, you know, if we're in the $1.5 million range of new money, he said that'll go a long way to fixing what he and Al considered to be the problems.
Okay. Well, if you can just maybe close one more loop and say we're coming back next week to vote this.
Yeah, I'll talk to him
double
tomorrow.
check it And
Yep.
just see where we are and come up with the best that you can.
Yep.
And if he's away, should the town planner play a role in this, in formulating the recommendation? Because it is by nature the plan of the town as it relates to property and infrastructure. So, but I don't know, if he's, I'm just trying, if he's away, it doesn't mean that.
They can fill. Anyway, we'll get the
Right.
information.
You know what you need to, you know where we're going with
Yep.
this. Okay, so that's an important piece. Okay, so that's about the water part. Any other budget update questions or topics we want to discuss?
So just to get a little feedback, more specific feedback. So I outlined, excuse me, I outlined a plan of using water reserves, sewer reserves,
Yep.
and additional general fund reserves to try to get to that $1.5 million
Mhm.
target area.
Yep.
And in broad strokes, that is something you're okay with.
I think as long as we understand closer to what.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So, there was a comment in here about staffing and less conservative use of local taxes to keep
Right, those are the
tax
other
rate.
two topics I was hoping we
Right.
could touch base on.
What's that?
I was hoping those are the other two topics we could discuss.
Yeah. Okay. If you're gonna head there right now, go right ahead.
I turn it back to you in terms of comments or feedback. Or if you want a little more information on it, that's fine.
Okay, so the model is on the staffing side, and then on the resources that they have, we're still maintaining the equivalent of 2.5% increase under the current budget, right? Is that correct or not?
Yes, so that those additional expenses are covered by some reductions in some other areas, savings. So originally, we assumed no increase in the health insurance. So that was dollars that we were able to free up, because traditionally we have 5% hike going towards that. So by not having that hike, that allows you to put those dollars towards a staff increase without going higher than the 2.5%.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on staffing or the?
I think in the staffing piece, what you have outlined is, I mean, it's consumed the conversation tonight, this type of need. You know, we
Mhm.
keep funneling back to have we managed communication, have we managed, you know, public outreach, have we, in every decision we're trying to make, and we need this kind of body in the building to start putting everything that we've been talking about into place. You know, we struggle, we feel like we struggle with the communication piece, and we have tried lots of different
Well, we've been
ways,
suppressive.
and we still feel like we haven't hit on it yet. I think having an individual devoted to the task is where we're at.
I think we've gone as far as we can.
Yeah, it's the only thing we haven't tried.
Yeah. So,
Is there a discretionary budget that is allocated? I didn't see that, because I think just hiring a person, it's like hiring a town crier, and in this day and age, there's expenses for resources like marketing platforms and stuff like that. So is there is there a budget to give to this person to go do stuff? Because just putting a person in place is great. I think it's really like a good idea. I just don't know if
Right, what other costs are there? Yeah.
it may only be half the cost.
Well, we have our website costs, which is already covered, and they're managing that.
Right.
We've got the PR piece with John. And that question, when is that contract up? Is that a year or 3? I don't remember.
That's just a year.
A year.
So it's up
So
in-
that needs to be looked at in terms
Right.
of what we're doing with him versus with something here.
Right.
And, the only other things is, are we gonna be using constant contact, what mechanisms are we gonna be using to deliver information up above and beyond what we've already got? So if John's not managing the blog, we're taking that, or however it works,
Yeah.
we should look at that in terms of what the total fully loaded cost would be. So, we could probably figure
Yes,
something.
we should spend a little time on that.
So we'll look at that next week. That's a good point. Okay. And anything else on that? Okay. And what about the 1.5 to the 2.5 in terms of the local receipts? Any thoughts on that? 1.5? Hello?
I just think it's a bigger discussion, but I'm not sure we have time for it tonight, because I feel like the notion of local receipts comes up a lot, and part of me just wonders where are these local receipts really coming from, like in terms of our plan moving forward. My personal feeling is that I don't feel like we have a reliable number there. And how it fills expected gap fills in the future. So my knee-jerk reaction to local receipts is it's great. I mean, I guess we have a certain level today. Just more generally, as we talk about the budgeting and the planning for the town going forward, I'm just not convinced that local receipts are actually going to grow to the levels that we expect. So for next year, I'm sure it's within line, but
Well, and I think
So
what
we're not-
we're talking about here is just as a 1 year.
Well, we're not assuming that the local receipts are growing, but we are, traditionally, we have been very conservative in those estimates. So to the point where we underestimate year over year, $800 to $1 million.
Which is a lot.
That's a lot. So the question is, so that has allowed the fund balance to continue to grow year over year. So we intentionally have been conservative, and then we use some of that conservativeness, flows in the fund balance, and we use that the following year for capital, but it still has been growing. So there, even with no growth in those estimated receipts, you have extra revenues.
yeah, I guess I'm not questioning. This is what I said. It's a topic for another day. I just think we need to unpack the notion of local receipts as it relates to some of the plans, the more 3 to 5 year window that we've been talking
Oh,
about.
okay, so it's not necessarily.
I didn't mean to.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to
Not
get it.
challenging the change in the.
Okay. So for this year, the question is, do we want to look at being less conservative or using 1.5 versus the 2.5 on using some of the local receipt money to defer?
Well, just a little bit of caution there. So once you decide to do that, you're really locked in
Right.
to that less conservative amount year over year, because unless you either find savings or go for a larger tax increase to backfill what you were using for local receipts. So it does have a long-term impact going forward.
Finance Committee has, on a fairly regular basis, asked that we be a little bit less conservative. Are they still in that
Yes,
line of thinking?
I would say they are more in that line of thinking that they would, some of them certainly would advocate for using all of it.
Mhm.
And that we shouldn't be assuming a conservative number. We should try to hit it as close to the actual as we can.
Well, the only problem with that is that once you hit a down year, the impact is
Correct.
very bad.
Right.
Well, I would I would be willing to talk about putting being a little bit less conservative. Certainly going all of it, I wouldn't think that is a very conservative approach. And I would like to save a little bit of that powder potentially for maybe some of the years when some of our upcoming debt starts hitting hard.
So are you saying like do 2 instead of 1.5? I'm trying to figure out what we're.
No. I would support the 190. I think,
Okay.
which is the 1.5%.
There is one additional thought that came to mind, and I need your help understanding this. What are we doing to plan for the school budget for next year, which in theory doesn't have the change that occurred this year? I just don't want us in a position where we're all of a sudden getting the bullwhip effect.
Right.
So are we, the reductions that we may have received this year in light of the changes for Essex are corresponding to us? What are we doing with that delta from what we thought we were going to pay versus what we're actually going to be charged? And are we reserving that, or is that actually being spent?
It's not being spent, and you're not raising it, so it'll help you get to your 1.5 increase rather than 2.5.
Right, but I guess what I want to protect against is it being used for alternative purposes and then us next year not having that plug in place, right?
Right.
So is it better to actually just put it into reserve?
Right.
Right. So that's what I proposed to the finance committee. They were not interested. They don't recommend that.
Really?
They don't recommend what?
They don't recommend raising that 65 and putting it into reserve.
Yeah, no.
They felt the reserves are already too high and that you're just adding more to so take a break for a year and then raise it the following
The problem
year.
is when we take a break for a year, we go back, the level's been reset at a lower level, and then all of a sudden we're scrambling.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I did not win the day in that argument.
Yes, now I know what you're talking about now, and I agree with you.
I agree.
Because that number is going to come back next year.
It will.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think we need to let the finance committee know that our, at least, I don't know if everybody else here has
Surprised that they're
agreed.
taking that position.
Yeah.
Their feeling was, again, that the reserves are already too high and that we ought to give taxpayers a win.
I mean, forgive me for not knowing this, I'm not familiar with reserve ratios on the state level, but where are our reserves as proposed relative to an average town?
So we're high. So we're around 16%, a little over 16%.
It's supposed to be about 11, 12 range?
And yeah, the 10 to 12 range is sort of the target.
There's been, we have a lot of capital expenses coming up. Use those reserves to take the pinch out of a bunch of them. So
I agree with you.
the hard parts of the school debt come on for 4 year period. We can start using reserves to pay down some of that. Or we can use it for capital projects. Senior center, we can look for the senior center project. If there's, not public or private money going into that, potentially we can use reserves for that. So there are some big things that we can do with that money. But I completely agree with Arthur that we should maintain whatever tax allotment that we're currently maintaining. I would have spent on that 65,000 so that we don't come up with a shortfall against Prop 2.5 for the school budget return that we know is going to happen next year.
Right. So one suggestion would be you could put that 65 into a soccer field stabilization account. You know that the turf field is going to need a new surfacing. That would be that would be one option for that money.
Well, I think we need to mark that. So just in summary, I want to make sure I've heard everything. From the perspective of the capital, we've asked for some additional, the concept of coming up with the general fund, water fund, sewer fund to close that up is in generally okay.
Yep.
A little bit more detail on what that would look like.
Which actual pipes? Yep.
And where it is and what those costs would look like is important. in terms of the whole communication position, just looking at what it would be as fully loaded
Right.
with
Some of those other
all those different pieces
costs,
tied into it. The 1.5 to 2.5, I think certainly you're marking directionally we feel okay about the 1.5, but concerned about the longer term. I think throwing up the flag about the school, 65,000 is very important. Back to the finance committee. Love to hear, and I understand where they're coming from, but I think we have to be smart about that. And then the last thing on here was the CPC project funding list. That was the last thing.
Yeah, just the one change was that the Masconomo parking lot went from 50 to 80. And they were comfortable with that increase out of their funds.
Okay.
They wanted to review some of the numbers with Chuck and Nate, and they did that.
All right, so that's sort of the parameters for the budget that we can get a little clearer next week for the, and if you have anything additional, just send it to me.
Yeah, maybe I should know this, I'll just admit I don't.
Okay.
Are there any anomalies beyond the water truck discussion in the fire budget, the police budget, harbor, and I have to throw in there Parks and Rec, because the beach is relatively back, so are they actually properly rebudgeting for what was expected maybe 2 or 3 years ago as opposed to last year? It's a minor number, so I don't want to get too hung up on that
Yeah,
one.
but yeah, no, she's very comfortable with that.
And then Bion, is there,
So Bion,
without the Sand Dollar Cove maelstrom,
right.
is there anything that he's proposing that is any significant variability?
So he is working on a third boat, and hoping that he will get a surplus boat, and we do have dollars for a new engine.
Is there any capital, sorry for not.
So that's in capital.
Is there any capital relative to fire or police that's of significance, other than that discussion?
So the ambulance is there, is in the budget now. This replacement ambulance is in the budget.
Right.
So to your question, is it, do we think about a tanker versus an ambulance? Do we have a place to put it, all that good stuff?
Yeah. That's beyond mine.
The only piece that is a little bit of a question mark is the whole radio system, but we're just not ready for that. So there are dollars in the capital, and do it in a phased manner. We're working with a consultant now to develop that master plan for the public radios. So we're a year away before really nailing that down.
So the root of my question is there are no surprises.
There we go. Okay, got that one. All right. So budget, I think we're clear on where we need to go and what we need, and what we need on the 27th. Is that right? 27th, 26th. 26th. Okay. All right. Thank you. And Arthur, anything else you have before you go, let me know, and we'll go from there. All right. Next item is consent agenda, February 4th minutes, approval of special events permit, half marathon by the sea, the Cape Ann PMC Kids Ride, and the Halloween Fright Raiser. Anything need to come out? Any changes? All right, I'll take
On
them.
the minutes?
We
Yeah.
have something in the minutes.
Of the part 4 of, in the minutes, go back to that. Here are the minutes. There are just 2 changes. One in, there was part 4 where presentation of the minutes, paragraph 13, the last sentence should be exacerbate as opposed to exasperate, even though it did
Well, I don't know.
exasperate.
Either word fits.
And then part 6 on White Beach, paragraph 12, it's stated Mr. Lamoth and he, and it should be Ms. Lamoth, she.
I saw that too. I forgot to mention that.
That's it.
Okay, with those 2 changes, I'll have a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good, thank you. All right, correspondence, letter from Francie Caudill, which we talked about when we talked about the Central Pond restoration. Greg, oh, this is interesting, the statewide essay contest. and the letter from Lori McCallison, regarding the management. Any comments on this?
No, just FYI, really, at this point.
All right. Okay, so town administrators report.
So, yeah, I can run through these fairly quickly. I think I mentioned to all of you in an email, so the MAPC is not willing to just do another project with that same funding source. However, they are willing to tap into a different funding source that they have to look at some another area of resiliency planning. So, looking for some feedback that the advancing the discussion and a little more design work on a storm barrier, perhaps, is a possibility to pursue. Advance that discussion in the community to see if it has legs or not.
I would love to get our sustainability resiliency committee together to work on this.
Right.
Because to me, it seems that would be we're interviewing them on the 4th. Right? So, just a thought.
That seems like a really big additional increase in scope for them.
Oh, I thought they were doing both. Am I missing this?
No, they were never doing. Well, I'd have to go back.
I'd say traditionally they've been focused more on
the wording. They were.
Recycling and
Just, I thought we had, maybe I misunderstood. I thought we had expanded.
so we
the
had
scope.
we've talked about the possibility of merging the MEP and the sustainability, make one committee and perhaps broaden their scope.
That's what I thought we were doing. But if we're not, then you've got a very good point.
So my take on the sustainability committee was their impact with respect to or their point, their reason, the way they thought that they would make an impact on things that were climate or otherwise related is in the other direction in terms of how we burn our resources, what we're doing in terms of recycling and what our actual impact on the environment is. Not so much protecting us from external events like weather. And the project that you're talking about has a really large scope. And the sustainability committee, I kind of think they actually have their hands full because we're dealing with recycling and composting and other things that are actually pretty directly going to affect our budget in the near term. They can have an impact there, but I don't think that if we stack something massive on them, totally, really very different from their current track, that it's going to be an effective use of their time. They might have the right people on that committee to do that, but I don't know. We picked them for other reasons. So I don't know about that.
So maybe it's time to look for a different subset. I know we've been trying to streamline some of the volunteer committees and whatnot, but one of the things that did kind of come out of the conversations at the last meeting when we were discussing the Ocean Street grant was looking to get into the community and tap some of the knowledge that people felt they had and working with the town on climate change and reasonable.
So, who would be, from a departmental perspective, that's my question.
I don't know.
From a town department responsibility, who owns that?
Right.
So,
In terms of it's probably DPW.
Yeah.
so I think we have to answer that almost first,
Yeah.
and then decide the right form and structure to follow. I misunderstood. I thought we were expanding the scope of the sustainability and bringing everything together. But if that's the direction we're headed, that's exactly right. I think we need to spend some time on this and figure it out. So I wouldn't necessarily go after advancing community discussions until we know who, what, when, and where we're trying to do. So maybe give some thought to that. I don't know if everybody agrees with that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were some people in the room
Who were
a
interested?
couple weeks ago that would be interested.
So I think finding that group within town who would own it and what type of resources would be helpful for them to use would be a good way to think about it. Okay. All right.
Yep. That one had it work out here. They'll be there for the rest of the week. Hopefully finish up on Friday, may extend into Saturday. With some cleanup work, but they should get that done. This is replacing valves, water valves in the intersection right outside here. So that's ongoing. Gave you an update on last week's meeting with Long Beach and the Cove there. Good turnout. For the most part, a pretty civil discussion, which was good. I'd say the meeting was attended primarily by folks who don't want to see changes. They like the way it is, and they feel that the handful of very busy days are just that, a handful.
And quite a few of them from out of town.
Yeah, combination. Combination.
So where's Brian going with this? You know?
So the HAC will hold a meeting in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, to sit down to see if they have a set of recommendations to bring before you. So that's the next step.
And what are they targeting?
What?
When are they targeting to do that?
So they hope to have a meeting first or second week of March. So I would expect them to come before you in April with some recommendations.
I guess is the original issue eelgrass?
No,
No.
the original eelgrass was safety and the numbers.
Question, by the way.
Yes, it's been a bit hijacked by that issue.
So what's being done to vector back to the original concern? Is the harbor committee focused on that?
I believe so, yes. And I think the eelgrass issue really is going more towards with the Concom
Yep.
and whether or not they want to venture into regulating that resource or not. And I'm hopeful that the HAC will focus on the safety issues.
Okay, I would add that there's an economic question there as well. At safety, once again, I think safety is the top priority. But when I look at the harbor, and I'm one of the beneficiaries of having a mooring in town, and I also go to Sandella Cove from time to time. But I think we need to look at the cost of the town and what we're spending money on, and for whom, and whether it's sustainable, economically, not environmentally.
Yeah.
Because the spend, as I look at the budgeting over the past couple of years, is pretty inelastic. The number of moorings in the harbor is completely inelastic,
Right.
and the number of visitors seems to be completely elastic. So
Yes.
that's, to me, when I see the situation, the fact is that we can't increase funding or availability to the water to offset the demands that not just Sandella Cove, the whole harbor is incurring. Because it's not, the issue is a lot of the increased traffic is coming into the harbor entirely, and the safety issue is just the increased wakes. There's all sorts of things that are going on, and Bion is one person, and he can increase the staff. We can add another boat. I don't know if we'll be able to keep up the pace at which the demand is growing. So safety is absolutely the first thing to consider, but then I think there's an economics to the situation, and the problem is physical space and budget are somewhat capped in certain respects. The usage is completely uncapped in theory. And I think it'd be good if Bion dug into some of the math behind the problem, so that it's not an emotional discussion like eelgrass seems to be.
Yep.
There's 700 moorings in the town, and 400 of them are owned by residents. So by definition, that's a very small percentage of 5,000 residents. And, only a percentage of those 400 use the water on any given weekend. Not all 400 are out there. So when you actually do the math on how many residents are in the harbor on any given weekend, you're talking about actually a very small number. So relative to the amount of spend on the harbor, I think we need to consider how much we're willing to spend in one particular area of town. And if we can't, then what are we going to do to protect the town, safety-wise and economically as well?
Right.
Somehow regulate it, because
Regulate.
right now it's in theory unchecked. I mean, we could get double the visitors next year. There's nothing we could do about it. But yet, Bayonne's not going to be able to do anything about it.
No, I think we need to
Yeah. So if they're
seriously
if they're getting
consider
away
a
from the
count.
rest,
I
that's good.
think there is a maximum number.
Mm-hmm.
If some people feel we haven't hit it yet, well, what is that number? That number exists.
I think Bayonne needs to ferret out some of that and have a recommendation that's rooted in some actual numbers that can be argued, but there's a reference point for the discussion. Right now, it seems to have gotten into this emotional environmental question, which I am not, it's completely off from what I think we're actually facing in town.
I think, and part and parcel to that advisory sort of from this to the charge of what the harbor advisory and then looking to come back to us with, we'd be interested in knowing that because it does set a different lens on it, an important one, and what their recommendations would be relative to that.
So up until this proposed year, so those mooring fees and other waterway fees are paying for harbor operations. So having a police patrol, now that's a $10,000 number that we've added to this year's budget. That's in the general fund. That's not from the harbor funds. So we could look at structuring it so that came from the harbor funds.
I think it's more just asking the question to figuring out what the
Yep.
The problem needs to be defined for the harbor committee.
Yeah.
Don't ask the harbor committee just to come up with a recommendation in abstract. The problem needs to be defined and given to the harbor committee saying we need a recognition on this problem. I think it's going to be a disaster if they're defining the problem and recommending the answer.
Okay. What's next?
FYI, we are participating in a potential grant, a regional IT grant looking at information technology services. Danvers is looking to be a bit of a regional service center. So we're teamed up with some of our neighboring towns, seeking some funds from the state to take a look at how that could be structured. And then there's also a parking study grant that we've submitted to MAPC to do an analysis of what is our parking capacity, how is it being used, and are there opportunities for more efficient use of what we have. And then the shared service study is making good progress, interviewing all the department heads, and we'll be coming back with some suggestions hopefully in the next few weeks on that. At least the short list, and then the bigger list will be coming later, closer to June, but we hope to have some projects on tap for prior to town meeting.
Anything else from the board?
Good, yes.
All right. The only other thing that came up we talked about today was we need to craft the town
Annual report
annual
from the
report
board.
from the board. So, are there any specific topics the board would like us? We'll get a draft together and send it around. But are there any specific topics you feel are top of mind that we need to communicate in our annual town report from the board of selectmen? Other than our checklist of everything we've done and what we
I would propose a theme of safety.
do. Unit safety.
Propose what?
A theme of safety.
What we're doing to keep the town safe.
Excellent.
I'm not saying that has to be it, I'm just throwing it out. People can throw out other ones.
No, that's what we want.
Could be environmental, it could be emergency, it could be, you know, a lot of themes of safety.
Safety seems fine.
Good, okay. So, any other comment from anyone? You have to grab this, Sandy. Well, they have to
Gail?
hear
You
you.
won't be heard. You need to be heard.
You have to be heard.
You have to use.
She can pick it up on that mic right now.
Have to, sorry, Sandy, because otherwise you won't be on TV.
I'm here being, as a, thanks to Adele, I continue that tradition of her always being here for every meeting. And I just want to say, sitting here, I mean, I have been to graduate school for planning and public policy and all of that. And I have to say, you guys are great. You just do a you ask terrific questions that are very on point, that kind of make sure money's being spent in a reasonable way. And it was, I basically was in Grand Central Station today at 1:15, racing to get here for, to get up to the car, which was in New Haven, and so on and so forth. And it was so worthwhile. I am really tired. I think you do a great job, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to listen.
Thank you. And that's Sandy Bobber Turner.
Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Sandy. That's very nice. Thank you.
Are you gonna now start sitting right there?
Yeah, that's right. She
Yeah,
was covered
right
over
up
there.
there.
She has a
Right there.
special, she had a special chair.
Right there.
Should be right
Yeah.
against the.
What a lady.
Oh,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it was.
Oh, I have only tiny.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. All right, well, that's the end of our regular session. I'll take a motion to adjourn, but to go into executive session for the purpose of possible litigation,
So-
conversation.
Second.
Okay?
Yes.
Yes.